Chapter 377. Go to watch net. Only then did Zi Yuan understand what had happened. She calmed herself down and said quickly, the Liuhe can transform into countless swords, which is most suitable for group battles. But it also has a fatal weakness, that is, once the sword it turns into is subdued by the opponent, all the other swords will disappear, and the sword that has been subdued will become the real body of the Liuhe. Go to watch net. Li Yundong suddenly understood and said, so any sword can be called the Liuhe? Zi Yuan nodded and said, yes. Now that they have noticed us, we have to leave quickly. Otherwise, once they find us, we will immediately be besieged by them. We will be doomed eternally. Li Yundong waved the long sword in his hand and said with a wry smile, how can we go? The two of us are still tied up. Without thinking, Zi Yuan said, you command us to move to the inner room. There is a secret room there. We might be able to find it if we look for it. This is the way out. Otherwise, when they find us here and rush in, we will be the target of public criticism. Li Yundong turned to Su Chan and said, Chan'er, go in and find the secret room. Tell me when you find it. Su Chan responded and turned to leave. However, Li Yundong warned her again, be careful when you find the secret room. Be on guard against someone attacking you from inside. Su Chan had seen Li Yundong and Zi Yuan almost sticking their necks to each other. It could be said that they were extremely intimate. She felt a little sour in her heart, but at this time, after hearing Li Yundong's words, she suddenly felt sweet in her heart. Then, like a little bird, she quickly turned around and flashed into the inner room. Zi Yuan said to Li Yundong, you command, and I will cooperate with you. The fairy-tied rope is getting tighter and tighter. If we move too much, it will continue to tighten. However, Li Yundong pondered for a while and said, no, I just thought of a way to get rid of this fairy-tied rope. Zi Yuan was shocked and asked with joy, what is it? Li Yundong laughed and said, it's very simple. Attract the heavenly thunder. Zi Yuan was shocked. It can't be, what if you hit both of us? How thin is this rope? To be able to strike the rope with the heavenly lightning without hurting himself, how precise was his control of the lightning? Your Five Thunders execution technique isn't proficient enough. Aren't you courting death by attracting the heavenly lightning to strike the immortal binding rope? Li Yundong said helplessly, what should we do? If the two of us are tied up like this, those guys will discover us sooner or later. Invisibility is useless, so we might as well give it our all. Besides, if we die, we should all die together. It's not bad to hold a fairy sister in my arms and ascend to immortality together. As the saying goes, dying under a peony flower makes me a romantic ghost. Ha! Zi Yuan blushed slightly and spat in a low voice, bah, who wants to die with you? Before she could finish her words, Su Chan rushed out of the inner room, hugged Li Yundong, and cried, Sir, I'll die with you. I won't allow you to die with anyone else. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing out loud. Fool, don't you know how to say that I won't allow you to die? Why do you make it sound like I'm going to die? Do you have no confidence in me? As he laughed, his body moved. In addition, Su Chan was hugging him. The immortal binding rope sensed his strength and slowly tightened. Li Yundong's laughter stopped abruptly. He took a deep breath and said, let go of me. Stop hugging me. This rope is going to break my ribs. Su Chan let go of him and looked at Li Yundong with tears in her eyes. She said eagerly, do you really have a way? Li Yundong coaxed, of course, your master is omnipotent. Of course, I have a way. You have to believe in him. Hurry up, be good and go into the house to find the secret room. I'll be fine later. Su Chan took Li Yundong's hand and said reluctantly, if you die, then I won't live either. I'll die with you. Li Yundong was moved, but he scolded with a smile, "Bah, bah, bah, you're unlucky. I want to live for 100 years and travel all over the world with you. How can I die so easily? Hurry up, don't delay. If they rush in later, your master won't be able to live even if he wants to." Only then did Su Chan listen to him. She wiped away her tears and went back into the inner room. Li Yundong shook his head helplessly and said with a smile, "This girl." Zi Yuan's eyes were fixed on Su Chan in the inner room. She suddenly sighed faintly and said, "It's really good to have someone in the world who is willing to give everything for you and loves you so much." A gentle smile appeared on Li Yundong's face. Yes. This kind of emotion only flashed by, and Li Yundong quickly said, "I'm going to use qi to attract the heavenly thunder. You should also use qi to protect your body. Don't be touched by the heavenly thunder. It's not fun." Although Zi Yuan didn't know how Li Yundong was going to attract the heavenly thunder and how he could ensure that the heavenly thunder would not hit him and accurately hit the fairy tide rope at the same time, she didn't refute Li Yundong's words out of a subconscious trust. Her whole body was covered with the jinqi of the Xianmen sect, and she looked at Li Yundong uneasily. Li Yundong took a deep breath and mobilized his jinqi to silently use the 5 thunder righteous method. After a while, white steam rose from the top of his head, mobilizing the qi of chaos between heaven and earth, causing the dark clouds in the sky to roll and become denser and denser. At this time, all the cultivators present also felt that something was wrong. Zhang Ling even faintly felt that there was a pair of majestic eyes in the sky staring at her back, which made her hair stand on end. Zhang Ling suddenly raised her head and shouted, "Who is attracting the heavenly thunder? Do you want to die? Aren't you afraid of being struck?" Wang Jinyuan's expression was cold. He sneered and said, "Which fellow Taoist is so bold as to want to die with us?" After that, he looked at every cultivator present fiercely. As long as he found out who was attracting the heavenly thunder, he would immediately strike. When the cultivators present saw that Zhang Ling and Wang Jinyuan had suddenly joined hands, they were all shocked and hurriedly tried to explain, "It's not me, it's not me." Zhang Ling's eyes were sharp, and her eyes were bursting with light. She swept them back and forth like a sharp knife, as if she was trying to find out who was attracting the heavenly thunder. Zhou Ping, who was next to her, suddenly said loudly, "Master, could it be the thunder dragon? Ahem, could it be the person who struck us tonight?" Zhang Ling's expression turned serious and she said decisively, "It's very possible." She suddenly turned her head and shouted at Wang Jinyuan, "Master Wan, did you really not go to Mount Longhu tonight?" Wang Jinyuan sneered and said, "Nonsense, I haven't taken a step out of the ancestral court all night." Zhang Ling thought, "Damn it, I made a mistake." However, she was stubborn and thin-skinned. She was unwilling to admit her mistake, so she said angrily, "Then why didn't you admit it just now?" Wang Jinyuan rolled his eyes and said arrogantly, "I'm the head of the Gazao sect. In terms of status, I'm higher than you, Zhang Ling. In terms of seniority, I'm also older than you. In terms of age, I'm also older than you. You questioned me as soon as you came up. If I admit defeat and this matter is spread out, how can I, Wang Jinyuan, put my face in the future?" Zhang Ling snorted and thought to herself, "Last time, you were killed and had to flee from the ancestral court. Even the Renyuan Jindan was taken away. Now that such a shameful thing has been spread out, what else can't you lose?" However, she was still afraid of Wang Jinyuan, so she didn't say it out loud. She searched for a while and didn't find anyone attracting the heavenly thunder. However, the dark clouds in the sky were getting thicker and thicker. Zhang Ling snorted and landed from the sky, lest the heavenly thunder hit the highest cultivator first. However, after she landed, she was furious when she thought about what had happened that night. First, her side hall had been struck, and the magic formation she had wanted to refine the sword spirit had been destroyed, causing the perfect Sanju formation to fail. Then, she had finally caught up with the enemy, but she had found the wrong target. She had been confused and fought with someone on the field. Now, she had been forced to land on the ground by the heavenly thunder and didn't even dare to fly. Zhang Ling thought to herself, I've been cultivating since I was in my mother's womb. When have I ever been bullied like this? The more Zhang Ling thought about it, the angrier she became, and the anger on her face became more and more obvious. Zhou Ping, who was beside her, observed her expression and said, Master, do you think it's Li Yundong's doing? Zhang Ling was stunned. Li Yundong? She thought for a while and asked doubtfully, does he know how to attract the heavenly thunder? Zhou Ping snorted and said, with Zi Yuan, that little b*tch, helping him, what's impossible? Zhang Ling suddenly flew into a rage. Zi Yuan is a b*tch. When I catch her, I'll put her in prison for 100 years. Zhou Ping was overjoyed when she heard this. She fanned the flames and said, Master, let's catch Li Yundong first. If we catch him, Zi Yuan will have no one to rely on. Zhang Ling said decisively, we can't let either of them go. While she was speaking, a loud noise suddenly came from the sky. The night sky, which had been thousands of miles long, was now covered with thick dark clouds. Thunder and lightning were intertwined in the clouds, and the power of heaven was outstanding. The cultivators present all looked up at the sky with frightened expressions. They all wanted to dodge subconsciously, but at this time, most of the people present were cultivators with status. They were all afraid that if they escaped, they would become the laughing stock of the cultivation world in the future. They wouldn't even be able to lift their heads. Thinking of this, although the cultivators present were afraid, they could only straighten their necks and look at the sky eagerly, praying in their hearts that the heavenly thunder would not come straight for them. However, Dang Chong of the Penglai sect did not have such concerns. Seeing that the heavenly thunder was about to fall from the sky, he let out a dry howl, turned his head, and jumped out of the red wall. He shouted, Run! Are you going to stand there and wait for the heavenly thunder to strike? As soon as he finished speaking, there was a loud bang. A bolt of heavenly thunder instantly cut through the sky and suddenly fell straight toward the side hall of the Gazao sect. Li Yundong, who was attracting the thunder in the side hall, suddenly threw the Liuha in his hand at the moment the heavenly thunder was about to fall. The Liuha sword flipped and rolled in the air. The snow-white blade illuminated Li Yundong's forehead, which was covered with fine sweat. At the same time, it also reflected the nervous expression in Zi Yuan's eyes. Boom! The heavenly thunder suddenly fell toward the side hall, fiercely pouncing toward Li Yundong and Zi Yuan. However, in mid-air, the hilt of the Liuha sword hit the heavenly thunder. The long sword guided the surging heavenly thunder from the hilt to the tip of the sword. The tip of the Liuha sword just happened to flip and fall on the fairy-tied rope. It was only half a centimeter away from the skin of the two of them. No matter which way it went, the two of them would be struck by the heavenly thunder. The fairy-tied rope was struck by the heavenly thunder and immediately fell to the ground. The Liuha sword was struck by the heavenly thunder and suddenly rotated violently. It turned into a flywheel and cut toward the statue of Emperor Guan in the shrine of the side hall. With a crack, the statue's head was instantly cut off. Before Li Yundong and Zi Yuan could react, they saw the head of Emperor Guan fall to the ground and roll a few times on the ground. Then, a golden round pill rolled out of it. In an instant, the fragrance of the pill filled the side hall. The pill shone with golden light. The light passed through the hole in the side hall that had been struck by the heavenly thunder and rushed straight into the sky, condensing and not dissipating. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan exclaimed at the same time, Renyuan Jin Dan. At the same time, all the cultivators outside the side hall exclaimed, the Jin Dan has appeared. At this moment, everyone's breathing became heavy. No cultivator could remain calm in the face of Renyuan Jin Dan. Even a great cultivator like Zhang Ling's pupils shrank in an instant, and a strong look of greed appeared on her face. Grab it! Although no cultivator blurted out this word, the same word popped up in everyone's mind at the same time. They rushed toward the side hall at the same time as if they had gone crazy. 16b. Chapter 378. Go to watch net. Just as Renyuan Jindan rolled out of the head of the statue of Emperor Guan, Su Chan shouted loudly in the inner room, "I've found the entrance." When Li Yundong heard this, he saw the Renyuan Jindan rolling on the ground and immediately jumped up. At the same time, he shouted, "Zi Yuan, take the Liuha and I'll take the Jindan. Let's go." At the same time as Li Yunyang shouted, Zi Yuan rushed to the statue of the headless Emperor Guan like lightning. She pulled out the Liuha sword and then quickly rushed into the inner room. Watch net. 7 K.O.M. Li Yundong's figure moved. He didn't even have time to pick up the fairy-tied rope. He rushed to the Renyuan Jindan and scooped it into his palm. Then, with a spin of his feet, he rushed into the inner room. As soon as Li Yundong entered the inner room, he saw Su Chan standing in front of a wall in the inner room. She pushed aside a statue and pointed to a narrow door that was as tall as a person and wide as a person. "Here, it's just a secret passage." Li Yundong didn't even think about it and said decisively, "Zi Yuan, you lead the way. Su Chan, you walk in the middle, and I'll cover you." After that, he threw Jindan to Zi Yuan and said, "If something happens later, you go first." Zi Yuan turned around and rushed into the secret passage. Then, without hesitation, she threw the Jindan to Su Chan. "Su Chan, you're the best at running away. If the pursuers are too close, take the Renyuan Jindan and run first." At this time, the Liuha had not recognized its master, so it was no different from an ordinary long sword. Li Yundong had never learned swordsmanship, so holding the long sword would be a burden, and it would be easy for others to recognize her. So she simply took the long sword with her and took it with her. Su Chan hadn't expected that the Renyuan Jindan would fall into her hands again. She was shocked and shouted, "Me? I want to go with Yundong." Li Yundong picked her up and threw her into the secret passage. "Don't talk nonsense. Let's go." Zi Yuan caught Su Chan and quickly ran into the secret passage with her. As soon as he threw Su Chan into the secret passage, someone broke into the side hall with a loud bang. He turned his head and went into the secret passage. He quickly tore off his clothes and covered his face. Zhang Ling's cultivation was the highest and her speed was also the fastest. She chased into the main hall, looked left and right, and immediately chased into the inner room. As soon as she entered the inner room, she saw a dark hole on the wall, and the statue of old Lord Taishang fell to the side. Zhang Ling saw that the hole could only allow one person to enter at a time. If there was someone guarding the hole, it would really be difficult for one person to pass through. Especially since it was pitch black inside, if someone were to ambush them, it would be very bad. The other cultivators also rushed to the inner room of the side hall. When they saw the dark entrance to the secret tunnel, they hesitated for a moment and stopped. No one dared to chase in. However, Zhang Lingyi was bold. Relying on her high cultivation level, she stomped her feet, clenched her teeth, and rushed in. Li Yundong had already expected that the other party would chase after him. Without saying a word, he slammed his palm toward the person. Zhang Ling shouted angrily, "Come on." Her palm met Li Yundong's palm. With a muffled bang, Li Yundong and Zhang Ling both took a step back at the same time, both of them shocked. Because the secret passage was dark, Li Yundong didn't know who it was. Moreover, he didn't know whether the secret passage he had found in a hurry was a way out. If it was a dead end, he could only guard the entrance and not let anyone in. Otherwise, it would not be one man guarding the pass, but a turtle in a jar. Li Yundong guarded the entrance of the cave, trying to buy some time for Zi Yuan and Su Chan to escape. He wanted to rely on the geographical advantage to defend for a while, but he didn't expect that the person would be so fierce, and his Jinqi was not inferior to his at all. Ever since Li Yundong entered the cultivation world, he had fought with cultivators from various sects and was undefeated. He had relied on his Jindan Jinqi in Niden, which was as condensed as steel. However, Zhang Ling had cultivated for decades and cultivated the orthodox Taoist magic. Her Niden was condensed and her Jinqi was vigorous. She was only above Li Yundong, not below him. In particular, Zhang Ling knew a lot of magic. Compared with Li Yundong, they were like heaven and earth. They were not on the same level at all. Li Yundong suddenly realized that the person in front of him was the strongest enemy he had ever met in his life. He was much stronger than anyone he had ever fought against. He knew that if he retreated because he was no match for this person, Zi Yuan and Su Chan would find out that this secret passage was a dead end. Then they would definitely die. There was no way for them to survive. It didn't matter if he died, but Su Chan and Zi Yuan couldn't die. He could only advance, not retreat. Li Yundong made up his mind and suddenly took a deep breath. The fighting spirit and fighting spirit in his body were burning to the extreme. His eyes were bright, shining with divine light, and he was full of fighting spirit. Zhang Ling, who had been forced to take a step back by Li Yundong, was also shocked. She had roughly guessed that the person inside was Li Yundong, but she had never expected that Li Yundong's Jinqi would be so vigorous, as if it was not inferior to hers. Especially after this person's palm attack, 2 rays of divine light shot out of his eyes, as if they were real. The momentum and Jinqi of his whole body seemed to be much more vigorous and majestic than before. Zhang Ling took a deep breath and thought to herself, there is such a powerful master among the younger generation of the cultivation world. I'm afraid Zi Yuan is not as good as him. The most amazing thing is that this kid is so young, how can his Jinqi be so vigorous? I've only seen such a cultivation at such a young age in my younger brother Zhang Tianshi. Where on earth did this guy come from? Zhang Ling wanted to test how vigorous Li Yundong's Jinqi was, and she also wanted to test where his bottom line was. She immediately took a deep breath and slapped Li Yundong with both palms. Without any fancy skills, she purely relied on her vigorous Jinqi to make a head-on blow. If Li Yundong was afraid, he could only retreat. If he didn't retreat, he could only take the attack. There was no way to dodge. Li Yundong saw the other party's 2 palms coming at him. Although the palms were not big, Li Yundong felt a strong and majestic aura coming at him. It was like a huge wave that could topple mountains and overturn seas, making him almost breathless. Although he had suddenly encountered a strong enemy, Li Yundong was not afraid at all. The Jinqi all over his body exploded like explosives, and the heavenly Jindan technique in his body was running rapidly. A crackling sound came from his bones, and he slapped Zhang Ling with both palms. With a loud bang, Li Yundong and Zhang Ling both took 3 steps back at the same time. The secret passage was shaken by the wind of their palms, and a lot of dust suddenly fell. The people in the side hall outside the secret passage also felt the ground shake a little. When Zhang Ling saw that Li Yundong's palm had not been at a disadvantage at all, she was suddenly shocked and angry. She had always been proud and arrogant. Among the cultivators in the world, except for her brother, the leader, she didn't respect anyone. But suddenly, in front of so many cultivators, she had been forced out by 2 consecutive palms. She felt ashamed and angry. She mobilized all the Jinqi in her body to the peak. With a loud shout, she pushed her palms and slapped them again. This time, Zhang Ling used all the Jinqi in her body. Li Yundong only felt that there was a high-speed train running in front of him. As long as he hit it, he would be smashed to pieces in an instant. Li Yundong knew that life and death were at this moment. The heavenly Jindan technique in his body suddenly ran to the 8th turn. The qi in his body was boiling, and the yin and yang qi between his two kidneys instantly intertwined. A stream of black qi and a stream of red qi suddenly sprayed out of his nostrils. One of his palms turned fiery red, and the other became as black iron. The yin and yang jindan qi rushed toward Zhang Ling like a beast tide. Zhang Ling was so anxious and angry that she didn't use her magic. Instead, she chose to compete with Li Yundong with the purest internal force and jinqi. This time, all of Li Yundong's potential was forced out. The long-lost heavenly jindan technique's 8 turns of the fire-nurturing realm was not a joke. Bang! The palms of the two men collided, and they were immediately sent flying backwards like cannonballs. Zhang Ling couldn't stop the momentum, and with a bang, she knocked down countless statues of the shrines behind her. Zhou Ping, who was beside her, was shocked and rushed to her side to support her. Only then did she stop the momentum and not continue to embarrass herself. The cultivators who couldn't get involved saw Zhang Ling and the mysterious man in the secret passage fight 3 times in a row, and as a result, she was repelled 3 times in a row. The last time, she was even blown away. They all burst into an uproar, and their faces showed strong shock and fear. Zhang Ling's cultivation was so high that she was absolutely famous in the cultivation world. Especially the magic cultivation she had shown in the chaotic battle just now, it made every cultivator present feel that she deserved her reputation. But Zhang Ling, with her cultivation, had been forcibly hit and sent flying. What would they do if it were them? For a moment, they looked at each other. Although they were salivating for Renyuan Jindan, this narrow and dark hole frightened them so much that they stopped moving forward. No one dared to take another step forward. "Master, are you okay?" After supporting Zhang Ling, Zhou Ping asked nervously and in horror. Zhang Ling stopped in her tracks angrily. She suddenly pushed Zhou Ping away and said angrily, "Get out of my way." After that, she slapped the ground with her palm, and with a loud bang, countless cracks appeared on the ground. Then, she grabbed the air with both hands and grabbed a large amount of fire and magma. She rubbed her hands together and clapped them again. A fierce and blazing fire dragon in her hand went straight to the secret passage. Everyone saw the fire dragon twisting and pouncing into the secret room, instantly illuminating the figure of a person. This person quickly pinched his fingers together, and his 2 hands were bound. His middle fingers were stretched out vertically like needles. It was the Samaya Mahamudra of the Vajra realm in the mantra Mahamudra. The man roared, "Bang!" The mantra was like thunder, shaking the ears of all the cultivators present with a buzzing sound, and their eardrums were in pain. The Mahamudra fiercely slapped out in the air, smashing the fire dragon into pieces. The flames fell on the wall of the secret passage and could not be extinguished for a moment, illuminating the figure of the man. Everyone fixed their eyes on him and saw that half of his body was hidden in the darkness, mysterious and majestic. The other half of his body was illuminated by the flames. His face was covered, and his eyes were shining brightly. His figure stood like a mountain, like a deep abyss or a high mountain. He was really majestic and could hold the fort by himself. Everyone saw that Li Yundong was guarding the entrance of the secret passage alone. Although there were many of them, they couldn't do anything to him. Even Zhang Ling, who had the highest cultivation, had been sent flying by him with 3 palms. They suddenly looked at each other. Although they wanted to snatch the treasure, they didn't have the courage to go forward. It was not the first time that Ding Nan, who was hiding at the back of the crowd, had seen Li Yundong fight back alone. But at this time, when she saw the scene in front of her, she couldn't help but sigh in her heart, "What is an invincible hero? This is it. Kids, you are too ruthless. You are the 6th one, forcing me to update 5 times. This Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, these 5 days, the update time is the same as before." Chapter 379. Go to Watch Network. The fire of the 9 earthly realms controlled by the Lady of the Earthly Fire was extremely fierce. As long as it was touched, it would immediately ignite into a raging fire. Except for a few magical items, there was nothing in the world that could withstand the burning of the fire of the 9 earthly realms. Go to 7 KOM. However, Li Yundong's Mahamudra was invisible and vigorous Shenqi, which could not be burned at all. It just happened to restrain Zhang Ling's fire of the 9 earthly realms. Moreover, Li Yundong's location was excellent, so it could be said that he had the geographical advantage. Zhang Ling saw that Li Yundong had easily dispersed the fire of the 9 earthly realms, which she was most proud of. The surrounding cultivators looked at Li Yundong with more awe. She was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. Seeing that her master had suffered a loss, Zhou Ping immediately shouted, "Li Yundong, are you tired of living? How dare you offend our Zhengyi school?" Most of the people outside the secret passage were cultivators who had participated in the siege of the Fox Zen school. At this time, they all recognized that this person was Li Yundong, especially his mantra Mahamudra, which had left a deep impression on them. They saw that Li Yundong was guarding the entrance of the cave, making it impossible for them to move forward. If they forced their way in, they were afraid that they would not end up well. The fact that Li Yundong had killed 2 people and defeated 7 people in a row in the Fox Zen school last time was still vivid in their minds, and they still had lingering fears. They said one after another, "Zhenrenli, let's talk about it. Did you take the Renyuan Jin Dan? How about we buy your Jin Dan? Name a price. Yeah, say something, it doesn't have to be fighting and killing. Zhenrenli, there are many powerful magical weapons in our Jinshan sect. Whichever one you like, just tell us. We'll exchange it for this Renyuan Jin Dan." The cultivation world had always believed in the law of the jungle. The weak were prey to the strong, and the fittest survived. Zhang Ling had tried to be tough before, but Li Yundong was even tougher than her. At this time, they were helpless, so they could only be humble and soft. Li Yundong saw that the flames on the wall of the secret passage were still burning, illuminating his figure clearly. He waved his sleeve, and a fierce and overbearing gust of wind suddenly waved out, immediately extinguishing the flames, and his figure fell into darkness again. When the crowd saw Li Yundong's figure disappear into the darkness in an instant and he didn't answer them, they immediately became anxious and hurriedly said, "Zhenrenli, say something. We can discuss something." At this time, Zhang Ling also slowly calmed down. She remembered that the moment she had fought with Li Yundong just now, she had seen a stream of red qi and black qi coming out of his nostrils. His appearance was strange and his cultivation method was powerful. She was shocked and shouted, "Li Yundong, did you get the heavenly Jin Dan technique? I didn't expect you to have actually cultivated to the 8th transformation of fire-nurturing realm at such a young age." Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, paper really can't wrap fire. She actually recognized me. Li Yundong made up his mind not to speak. He remained silent, neither admitting nor denying it. But as soon as Zhang Ling said that, the other cultivators immediately exploded. Du Fei of the Chuanzhen Dragon sect said in surprise, "Zhenrenli, I've long heard that you've obtained the long-lost heavenly Jin Dan technique. I originally thought it was a rumor, but I didn't expect it to be true. Our Chuanzhen Dragon sect has a good relationship with Mr. Chen Pu. Where did you get the heavenly Jin Dan technique? Can I borrow it to have a look?" As soon as Du Fei said this, the cultivators of the other sects were unhappy. Zhang Hongqing of the Jinshan sect said loudly, "Zhenrendu, your words are inappropriate. What do you mean that your Chuanzhen Dragon sect has a good relationship with Mr. Chen Pu? Are you shameless? Mr. Chen Pu is from the last 5 generations of the Tang dynasty. Your Chuanzhen Dragon sect was founded at the end of the Song dynasty and the Yuan dynasty. There have been more than 300 years between them. Aren't you too shameless to claim a relationship with him? Du Fei's face darkened. He turned his head and said, "Our Chuanjian Dragon sect is an orthodox Taoist sect. The heavenly Jin Dan technique that Mr. Chen Pu created is also an orthodox Taoist Kung Fu. Wang Chongyang, the founder of the Chuanjian sect, combined Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism into one. He learned from all kinds of sects, including Mr. Chen Pu's Gall training technique. According to the cultivation method, we belong to the same lineage, so how can there be no relationship?" Du Fei's words made the other cultivators burst into laughter. Chen Anji of the Eastern Chinese sect said sarcastically, "If that's the case, then our Grandmaster Ning Chuanjian and Mr. Chen Pu are even closer." Immediately, a cultivator said, "Nonsense, Ning Chuanjian is also a cultivator of the Song dynasty. How can they be closer?" Chen Anji said sarcastically, "According to Zhenrendu, the Kung Fu created by Ning Chuanjian of our Donghua sect is also an orthodox Taoist Kung Fu. Moreover, our Grandmaster Ning Chuanjian is from the Northern Song dynasty and lived much earlier than Wang Chongyang. According to the time, isn't he closer to Mr. Chen Pu?" Everyone burst into laughter, taking pleasure in his misfortune. Zheng Yuan, who was standing at the back, said in a low voice with a face full of sarcasm and disdain, "This group of good-for-nothings. When they encounter something, they only know how to undermine each other. Alliance of the Six Sects, bah. What the hell? What's the use of asking about the heavenly Jin Dan technique instead of chasing after the Renyuan Jin Dan in front of him? Will he spit out what he has eaten? Stupid, stupid beyond belief." Ding Nan also asked in a low voice, "Master, what is the heavenly Jin Dan technique?" Zheng Yuan glanced at her and said kindly, "I'll tell you when we get back." As he spoke, his expression suddenly became very unwilling and resentful. However, Li Yundong has obtained the Renyuan Jin Dan and the heavenly Jin Dan technique. I'm afraid that our chances of revenge have become very slim. Alas, I originally wanted to fish in troubled waters tonight and see what benefits I could take, but I didn't expect that Li Yundong would take advantage of it. Damn it, damn it. While he was whispering to Ding Nan, the cultivators of the various sects were already quarreling. Zhang Ling was irritated when she heard this. She shouted, "What are you arguing about? Can you get a result by arguing like this? How can you make the other party willingly return the rare treasures to you just by talking? What kind of sweet dreams are you having?" Zhang Ling was of high seniority and strength, so her words were extremely prestigious. The cultivators of the various cultivation sects seemed to wake up from a dream and once again united against the common enemy. They said one after another, "Li Yundong, hurry up and hand over the heavenly Jin Dan technique. This is the most precious treasure of our Taoism. All the cultivation sects in our cultivation world have a share. How can you keep it all to yourself? That's right. Do you think you can defeat so many of us by yourself? Can a small fox Zen school withstand the joint attack of so many sects? Nonsense. If Li Yundong could bow his head and admit defeat, he would not have stood out in Mount Tianlong. Does this kind of person look like someone who can be threatened? Then what do you think we should do? He's guarding here, and we can't rush in. Can we just guard here? Why not? With so many of us guarding here, we can exhaust him to death. Hey, no, what if there is an exit in this secret passage? Oh, damn it. If there is an exit, what should we do? Hey, Li Yundong hasn't spoken for a long time. Could he have already run away? It's possible. Who among you can go in and have a look? F*CK, why don't you go in and have a look? The cultivators of the various cultivation sects made excuses. They all wanted each other to go in and be cannon fodder, but no one was willing to take the initiative to go forward. Even Zhang Ling was nervous. She thought to herself, I didn't get any benefits when I went up just now. I don't know if I can get any benefits if I go up now. How many magic did that little b*tch teach this guy? How many more abilities does this guy have that he hasn't shown? It's not a big deal if I can't beat him, but it's a big deal if I lose face for myself and the sect. At this time, a cultivator suddenly shouted, "By the way, where is Master Wang Jinyuan? Hurry up and ask him if there is an exit in this secret passage and where it leads to." At this time, the cultivators in the room of the side hall remembered that they were on the ground of the Gazao sect. They quickly looked around and found that Wang Jinyuan, the master of the Gazao sect, was not there. F***ck, where is Wang Jinyuan? Did he run away like last time? Didn't he just say that he would keep all of us here? He was so fierce. Why is he nowhere to be seen now? Nonsense, who doesn't know how to say fierce words? With so many sects coming to snatch the Renyuan Jindan, how can he stop them? If he doesn't run, will he stay and humiliate himself? Bah, this Wang Jinyuan is too much. He doesn't even want his own ancestral court. Just now, he was so confident. Zhou Ping saw that they were quarreling, so she said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, stop quarreling. If we quarrel for one more second, Li Yundong will escape a little further. Since no one is willing to go in and find out what is going on, why don't we release our powerful magical weapons and let them go in together? I believe that no matter how powerful Li Yundong is, he won't be able to withstand the attack of so many powerful magical weapons. Once he fights back, we will know that he is not inside. If he doesn't fight back, he will definitely die, and we can also snatch the Renyuan Jindan back." When the crowd heard this, some cultivators immediately slapped their thighs and said loudly, "That's right. Why didn't I think of such a simple way? Zhenren Zhou deserves to be the disciple of the Lady of the Earthly Fire. Good idea, let's do as you say." Zheng Yuan of the Yin Yang sect of Mount Wuhua looked at Zhou Ping with a sneer. He said to Ding Nan in a low voice, "Good disciple, you have to remember this woman. She is ruthless and quick-witted. If she becomes a great person in the future, she will definitely be your strong enemy." At this time, the cultivators of the various sects released their powerful magical weapons one after another and then attacked the secret passage like a storm. Everyone heard a clanging sound in the secret passage. Their powerful magical weapons seemed to have hit a steel wall and could not move an inch. They immediately shouted, "This guy is still inside. Everyone, come on." After confirming that Li Yundong was still inside, the cultivators of the various sects became energetic and drove their powerful magical weapons to attack frantically. But no matter how hard they attacked, there was still a clanging sound coming from inside. After a long time, they couldn't help but feel suspicious. What's going on? Why do I feel that something is wrong? Zhang Ling was also confused. She shouted, "Let me do it." After that, she clapped her hands and released a fierce fire dragon, which rushed into the secret passage. Wherever the fire dragon went, it immediately lit up the surroundings. Everyone saw an iron wall covered with golden Sanskrit in the secret passage. It was the fan leaf of the Fan of Seven Treasures. The Fan of Seven Treasures sensed that the fire dragon was coming straight for it, but it did not dare to intercept it. It immediately retracted its fan leaf and fled into the secret passage in the blink of an eye. Everyone was shocked and cried out in unison, "Oh no, we've fallen into the trap of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Li Yundong has run away." Zhang Ling shouted angrily and took the lead to chase into the secret passage. With someone taking the lead, the others also became bold and rushed in. Along the way, Zhang Ling was extremely vigilant as she sprinted forward. The fire dragon that she had released led the way. After she sprinted for a while, the fire dragon suddenly rushed out of a cave with a loud bang. With a whoosh, the branches and leaves that were covering the entrance of the cave were set ablaze, and the fire spread in all directions. Zhang Ling rushed out of the cave. She looked around and realized that she was already at the foot of the mountain. She snorted angrily and waved her hands. The flames that were spreading around immediately flew towards her palms. Zhang Ling rubbed her palms together and the flames immediately turned into a puff of green smoke and disappeared without a trace. At this time, the cultivators of the other sects rushed out of the secret passage one after another. They all stamped their feet and said angrily, "Damn it, he got away." Zhou Ping also said angrily, "The monk can run away, but the temple can't. I know where his lair is. Everyone, follow me." Chapter 380. Go to watch net. As soon as the crowd heard Zhou Ping's words, they immediately shouted, "Okay, let's go find trouble with him. Let's see where he can run to." At this time, everyone felt like they had been played. They were furious and excited. They quickly flew away from Mount Gazao with Zhou Ping and flew aggressively toward Tiannan City. Go to watch net. But after flying to Tiannan City, Zhang Ling suddenly shouted, "Wait." At this time, Yan Fang had already escaped, and Wan Zhenyuan was no longer there. Zhang Ling had become the leader of this group of cultivators. As soon as she spoke, everyone immediately stopped in mid-air. They asked in confusion, "Zhenrenzhang, what's wrong?" Zhang Ling turned to Zhou Ping with a cold expression and said, "Does Li Yundong live in such a busy city?" Zhou Ping nodded subconsciously. "Yes, he lives in a very high-end community, and he has also opened a shop on the busiest pedestrian street in Tiannan City." Zhang Ling sneered and said, "Humph, there are so many of us cultivators. What should we do if we go to him? Are you going to fight and kill everyone?" Her words made the cultivators of the other sects tremble and fall silent. They knew that there was an iron law in the cultivation world that could not be violated, that was, no magic or magical items could be used to kill secular mortals. Compared with this iron law, there was another unwritten rule in the cultivation world, that was, no magic that could be detected by secular mortals in front of them. Over the years, thanks to the reform and opening up, the cultivation world had gradually regained its vitality. However, almost every senior cultivator still had lingering fears about the terrible 10 years of turmoil. All the Taoist temples in Mount Longhu had been smashed by the Red Guards, and the ancestral grave of Wang Chongyang, the founder of the Chuanzhen sect, had been dug up by the Red Guards. His bones had been thrown into the wilderness. If it hadn't been for Zhao Maozhong, a villager of Zuan village, who had kindly picked up Wang Chongyang's bones, Wang Chongyang's coffin in Chongyang Palace would have still been an empty grave. That storm had almost dealt a fatal blow to the cultivation world, and it had almost been beyond redemption. As a result, the older generation of cultivators, who had finally recovered, learned a lesson: under the current government control, cultivators must keep a low profile. They must never use magic in front of secular mortals, lest they attract the attention of the country and bring a terrible disaster to the cultivation world again. Therefore, the older generation of cultivators had repeatedly told their disciples and grand-disciples about this unwritten rule. At present, these cultivators were all inner disciples, and most of them were cultivating in the mountains. They had chased Li Yundong to Tiannan City one by one, only to find that Li Yundong was living with secular mortals. His neighbors were all ordinary people. If they made a move, with Li Yundong's strength and the power of the Fox Zen school, it would definitely not be good. It would be a big event like Mars colliding with Earth. Previously, on Mount Tianlong, the place was sparsely populated, and the outer disciples of various sects had sealed the mountain. Therefore, the fight on the top of the mountain was extremely lively and did not attract the attention of secular mortals. However, if they were to start a fight in the middle of the city, it would be a huge joke, and the consequences were definitely not something they could bear. Then what should we do? Immediately, a cultivator asked, "Should we just give up and go back with our tails between our legs?" Zhang Ling snorted coldly. Cultivators' affairs should be settled in the cultivation world. Isn't he going to open a shop? Are you afraid that we won't be able to find him? The Taoist assembly will be held in a while. Send him an invitation and see if he wants to go. If he doesn't go, all the cultivation sects in the world will look down on him. There's no need for us to do anything. The other sects will scramble to find trouble with him. If he goes, we will deal with him fair and square. The cultivators of the various sects were overjoyed and said one after another, Jinrenzhang, that's a good idea. Let's do it this way. Someone also said doubtfully, but there's still a long time to go before the Taoist assembly. Are we going to let Li Yundong take the Renyuan Jindan away just like that? Zhang Ling glanced at him sideways. Do you think he will leave the Renyuan Jindan for you to snatch? If you want to go, go by yourself. If you cause any trouble, don't get our Zhengyi school involved. The cultivator who had spoken before suddenly shrank his neck, his face full of anger. Zheng Yuan had been following them at a distance, flying with his disciple, Ding Nan. He didn't want to stay with this group of people, but he didn't want to leave either. At this time, when he heard what the people present were saying, he turned to Ding Nan and said, "Let's go. We can't do it tonight. So many people have been taken advantage of by a little boy. What a shame." After that, he took Ding Nan and flew back to Mount Wuhua without saying goodbye to the crowd. As soon as Zheng Yuan landed on the ground with Ding Nan, he sneered and said, "The 6 great sects, a group of good-for-nothing boys. I really don't know what their leader is thinking." After that, he turned to look at Ding Nan and suddenly said, "By the way, didn't you say last time that your physical body was Li Yundong's classmate? Why don't you go?" Ding Nan suddenly became agitated and shouted, "I won't go. If you want to go, go by yourself." Ding Nan was afraid that she would lose face in front of Li Yundong and that he would look down on her. How could she be willing to face him before her cultivation was complete, let alone beg him in a humble voice? Seeing Ding Nan's fierce reaction, Zheng Yuan thought that his disciple, Lv Fengping, had remembered the previous destruction of her physical body. He had no choice but to say helplessly, "I haven't said anything yet." "Why are you so agitated?" Ding Nan said loudly, "Nothing. I don't want to talk to him." Zheng Yuan could only coax her, "Okay. Alas, then I have to think of another way. However, Li Yundong's cultivation is already high. Now that he has a Renyuan Jindan, I'm afraid that I won't be able to do anything to him in the future." After taking a few deep breaths, Ding Nan gradually calmed down and said, "Don't worry about that. As far as I know, Li Yundong will most likely not take this Renyuan Jindan himself. Instead, he will give it to Su Chan or Zhou Qin." When Zheng Yuan heard this, he immediately asked curiously, "Why? He doesn't take the Renyuan Jindan himself, but instead gives it to others. Isn't he a fool?" But soon, Zheng Yuan suddenly understood and said, "I understand. Could it be that he wants to raise these 2 women as cauldrons and then harvest their yin to nourish his yang? Yes, that must be it. This guy is so lucky." Hearing this, Ding Nan sneered in her heart. "Li Yundong is a rare gentleman in this world. Do you think he is like you? You are a despicable person, so you think of everyone in the world as despicable people." While the cultivators of various sects were chasing Li Yundong to Tiannan City, in the Gazao sect on Mount Gazao, Wang Jinyuan stood alone with his hands behind his back in the courtyard where the battle had taken place. He looked up at the dark clouds dissipating and the starry night sky, silent like a statue. Not long after, a tall and burly man slowly walked over from behind him. He was holding the Qiankuan jasper pole in one hand and the fairy-tied rope in the other. His voice was surprisingly old and hoarse. "The Renyuan Jindan has been taken away? This Master Wuhua's destiny connection does have some skill." Wang Jinyuan didn't look back. He said coldly, "You'd better make sure that your wishful thinking is not wrong. Otherwise, The man chuckled. "For decades, I've been meticulous in my calculations. What in the world can escape from my calculations?" Wang Jinyuan's face was full of sarcasm. "Oh? If you really want Li Yundong to take the Renyuan Jindan, why did you tie him up so tightly with the fairy-tied rope? Aren't you afraid that he won't be able to break free and end up making a fool of himself? The man snorted and said, ever since he took Chanar's Renyuan Jindan, I've been observing him for a long time. How can the person I choose be easy to deal with? If he can't escape, it means that he is not the person I want to choose. At worst, I can choose another one. Wang Zhenyuan suddenly turned his head and said angrily, B*****, do you think the Renyuan Jindan I refined is the Lu Wei Dihuang pill? You think it's a waste? The man said bluntly, don't talk nonsense. I helped you collect the spiritual herbs needed for your Renyuan Jindan. If I hadn't helped you get these two big golden snakes, you would never have been able to refine the Diyuan Jindan in your life. There was a flash of anger in Wang Zhenyuan's eyes, but he quickly suppressed it and said in a deep voice, now the Diyuan Jindan is still missing the most important guiding drug. As long as I have this guiding drug, I can refine the Diyuan Jindan. The man thought for a moment and said, once the Diyuan Jindan is refined, our plan will be more than half successful. At that time, the Gazao sect of external alchemy will not be far from rising again. Wang Zhenyuan's eyes couldn't help but show a strong burning light. He thought for a while and suddenly said, where's your woman? The man said lightly, she's asleep. Wang Zhenyuan snorted coldly and said, those who achieve great things don't care about trifles. I think you'd better get rid of her as soon as possible. Aren't you afraid that she'll leak our affairs if you always bring an ordinary person with you? The man snorted and said, I can betray everyone in the world, but I can't betray her. If you say that again, I'll kill you first. Wang Zhenyuan's expression changed, but he soon returned to normal. He laughed and said, I didn't expect that an old fox like you would fall in love with someone. It's funny, it's really funny. The man said coldly, you don't have to worry about my business. Just do your job well. The Taoist assembly will be held soon. You'd better make sure that nothing goes wrong. Otherwise, don't expect the Gazao sect to rise again in this lifetime. Wang Zhenyuan also sneered and said, don't always threaten me with this. You want to cooperate with me because you want your Fox Zen school to rise again, don't you? If we work together, we'll both benefit. If we fight, we'll both lose. So don't talk about this. The man was silent for a while, then said, in short, you should get the last herb as soon as possible. Otherwise, everything will be empty talk. I'll arrange other things. After that, he turned and walked into the side hall. Wang Zhenyuan snorted and continued to raise his head. He looked at the vast starry sky, but there was a meaningful smile at the corner of his mouth. He murmured slowly, the cultivation world will not be peaceful anymore. Chapter 381. Go to watch net. While Zhang Ling and the others were aggressively rushing to Tiannan City, Zi Yuan and Su Chan were on the roof of a building next to their residence, looking around vigilantly and nervously. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. They didn't dare to go home directly. Although they knew that the other party would definitely be able to find them nearby, if the other party was really stubborn and followed them directly into the house, it would be a bloodbath. Su Chan anxiously looked around on the roof, searching for Li Yundong's figure. As the little girl looked around, she said anxiously to Zi Yuan, Sister Zi Yuan, Yundong will come back, right? Zi Yuan was also under a lot of pressure. She knew that tonight, they had completely offended several major Taoist cultivation sects in the world. As the saying goes, an ordinary man is not guilty, but he gets into trouble because of his wealth. Li Yundong had stolen the Renyuan Jindan and let them find his tracks. It was simply unimaginable. Although Zi Yuan secretly criticized Li Yundong in her heart as to why he had to snatch the Renyuan Jindan, with his strength, it wouldn't take long for him to become an extremely powerful great cultivator. Why would he risk the world's condemnation by snatching the Renyuan Jindan? Li Yundong thought to himself. At that time, the situation was urgent, so Zi Yuan did not refute Li Yundong's opinion and followed his advice. But now, Zi Yuan was also not sure what to do and couldn't wait to discuss it with Li Yundong. However, the two of them waited for Li Yundong to return. Even though Zi Yuan was usually calm and composed, she couldn't help but panic at this time. But Su Chan was even more panicked than her. She could only pretend to be calm and comforted Su Chan, saying, "Don't worry, Li Yundong is quick-witted and very strong in fighting. He will definitely escape." Su Chan anxiously paced around in place. "Then why hasn't he come back yet? I'm so anxious. How about I go find him?" As she spoke, the little girl was about to fly up and look for Li Yundong's whereabouts. Zi Yuan quickly stopped her and advised, "Don't worry. Maybe Li Yundong is afraid that they will find their way home, so he is leading them in circles. Besides, where are you going to find him?" Su Chan was so anxious that she was about to cry. She said, but I'm just worried." Zi Yuan saw that Su Chan was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She couldn't even persuade her. She couldn't help but become more and more anxious. She thought to herself, could it be that something really happened to Li Yundong? Su Chan waited patiently for a while. She gritted her teeth and said, "No, I have to go find him. Sister Zi Yuan, wait here, lest he gets anxious again when he comes back and doesn't see us." Zi Yuan thought for a moment and said, "No, I'll go. You've made too many enemies in the cultivation world. It'll be better if I go." Su Chan hesitated for a moment. Just as she was about to say something, a green light flashed by, and a figure landed not far away from them. Su Chan fixed her eyes on the figure and saw a handsome boy carrying a black iron fan on his shoulder. He was standing not far away, smiling at her. Who else could it be but Li Yundong? Su Chan thought to herself. Su Chan was overjoyed. She rushed into his arms like a swallow returning to its nest and shouted, "Master, you scared me to death." Li Yundong opened his arms, hugged her, and said with a smile, "What's wrong?" Su Chan cried and laughed at the same time. "Why didn't you come back for so long? It's almost dawn. I thought something had happened to you. I was so scared that I almost lost my life." Li Yundong rubbed her hair affectionately and said softly, "Silly, how could something have happened to me?" As he spoke, he found that Zi Yuan was staring at him not far away. Li Yundong smiled and nodded to Zi Yuan. "Are you all right along the way?" Zi Yuan didn't want to disturb Li Yundong and Su Chan's reunion just now, so she just watched from the side. At this time, when she saw Li Yundong talking to her, she stepped forward and said, "We're all fine. Su Chan wanted to find you just now, but why did you take so long to come back? How did you know we were here?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "I was guarding the entrance of the cave. Seeing that there was no news from you for so long, I thought that you must have escaped, so I left the fan of 7 treasures to cover my retreat and slipped away. However, after I escaped from the cave, I didn't run far. I hid in the mountains. When I saw these guys aggressively rushing to Tiannan City, I followed them from afar." Zi Yuan was shocked. "They're coming? Where?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "They came and then went back. I guess they were afraid of the secular mortals around us and didn't dare to fight, so they went back." Zi Yuan had a thoughtful look on her face. She said, "It's very possible." As she spoke, she looked at Li Yundong and couldn't help sighing. "Why were you so reckless this time? You took chestnuts from the fire among so many cultivators and snatched Renyuan Jindan. Didn't you think about the consequences it would bring to you and your sect?" Li Yundong didn't comment. He touched Su Chan's hair, then turned to Zi Yuan and said, "I'm sure they won't come tonight. It's windy here. Let's go back first and talk. Zi Yuan had no choice but to nod. As long as Li Yundong was by her side, even if the sky fell, she would only be able to cover it with a quilt. The little girl nodded her head like a chick pecking rice. She giggled and said, "Yundong, you were so powerful today. You blocked so many people's pursuit by yourself." Li Yundong chuckled and didn't say anything. He took Su Chan and Zi Yuan back to his balcony. Because Li Yundong's two families were all cultivators, these people didn't have the habit of going through the main door at all. Therefore, no one had a balcony door. Li Yundong landed in his residence and pushed the door open. Li Yundong took a look and saw that the room was dark and frighteningly quiet. The little foxes and the others seemed to have fallen asleep. Li Yundong nodded to Zi Yuan and Su Chan, and the three of them entered the door quietly. Then, they went to Li Yundong's room together. After Li Yundong motioned for Su Chan to close the door, he said to Zi Yuan, "You just asked me why I wanted to take risks and snatch this Renyuan Jindan, right?" Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Yes, you're getting yourself into trouble." Li Yundong didn't get angry. He smiled slightly and asked, "Then I want to ask you, even if I don't snatch this Renyuan Jindan, will the Zhengyi school let you go?" Zi Yuan was stunned and didn't say anything. Li Yundong asked again, "Will the Zhengyi school let us go?" Zi Yuan had a thoughtful look on her face, but she still didn't say anything. Li Yundong said, "You've seen it before. The Zhengyi school has been forcing you and me time and time again. They are aggressive and don't want to give us a way out at all. In their eyes, we are aliens and should be exterminated. You are a traitor who helps the evildoers do evil and helps the outsiders. Do you think this kind of situation can be reversed?" Zi Yuan sighed softly and said, "But it's not worth offending so many cultivation sects in the world." Li Yundong laughed and asked, "It's strange. Last time, you encouraged me to snatch the Medicine King tripod. This time, I snatched the Renyuan Jindan, but you complain a lot. What's the meaning of this?" Zi Yuan sighed and said, "How is that the same? With the Medicine King tripod, it's equivalent to having a chicken that lays eggs. You won't starve to death in the future. Anyway, no matter how hungry you are, you will have eggs to eat. It's normal for people to grab a chicken when they're about to starve to death. But the Renyuan Jindan is just an egg. Do you think it's worthwhile to offend almost all the cultivation sects in the world for an egg before you're very hungry?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "But we can't deal with the Zhengyi school alone. Why should we care about the other sects? Anyway, offending one is offending a group is also offending. These cultivators just want all the benefits in the world to be theirs. They have nothing to say. But if you get a little benefit, they will be jealous and secretly play tricks on you. Isn't the last time we participated in the tea art competition the best proof? If we don't grab it ourselves and fight for it ourselves, do you expect the other sects to give us a way out?" The more Li Yundong spoke, the tougher his tone became. He said rudely, "Zi Yuan, don't be silly. There's no turning back for you and me. If we stretch our heads out, we'll be stabbed, and if we shrink our heads, we'll also be stabbed. It's better to take chestnuts out of the fire and grab the Renyuan Jindan to strengthen ourselves. In this day and age, only by strengthening ourselves is the real king. It's absolutely unrealistic to expect these people to show mercy." The longer Su Chan spent with Zi Yuan, the more she respected Zi Yuan's character. Seeing that Li Yundong's words had made Zi Yuan speechless, the little girl couldn't bear it. She gently pulled Li Yundong's arm and said, "Yundong, don't say that to Sister Zi Yuan. She's doing this for your own good." Li Yundong hadn't expected Su Chan to take the initiative to speak up for Zi Yuan. He chuckled, pinched the tip of the little girl's nose, and said softly, "You stay away for a while. I have something to ask Zi Yuan alone." I'll call you in later, okay? Su Chan nodded and looked at Li Yundong eagerly. Then don't be angry at Sister Zi Yuan. If you have something to say, let's talk about it. As she spoke, she turned her face and said to Zi Yuan, Sister Zi Yuan, Yundong has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Don't take it to heart. Li Yundong couldn't help but reach out and slap her round buttocks. He scolded her with a smile, you're being a good person on both sides. I'm the villain. Hurry up and come back in later. Su Chan covered her buttocks with both hands and made a face at Li Yundong. Then, she turned around and went out. Before she closed the door, she stuck her head out and took a look, her eyes rolling. Her smart eyes seemed to be saying, Yundong, don't be angry at Sister Zi Yuan. Li Yundong understood what the little girl was thinking. He scolded her with a smile, you're still looking? If you keep looking, I'll slap you again. Su Chan stuck out her tongue and closed the door. Zi Yuan watched Su Chan leave with a smile. She sighed softly and said, you're really lucky to have such an intimate partner like Su Chan. Li Yundong nodded and sighed softly. Yes. Zi Yuan smiled and said, what do you want to ask me? Just say it. Li Yundong's expression became serious. He said, let's start from when we go to Mount Gazao. Zi Yuan nodded and said, okay. Li Yundong asked, I have a few questions. Why did you immediately chase after Su Chan when you heard that it was Chao Yi or Zhuang Yiting when she came out of the room? Zi Yuan sighed softly. I knew that with your intelligence, this matter couldn't be hidden from you for long, but I didn't expect you to find out so soon. Li Yundong said with a solemn face, tell me quickly. This matter is very important and very strange. We followed this person to Gazao sect. Why did Yan Fang appear again? I can understand that Yan Fang has the Liuhe sword in her hand, but why did Yan Fang appear when we chased the Shibwa of Fox Zen school to Gazao sect? If it's just a coincidence, it doesn't make sense. Could it be that Yan Fang is Chao Yi or Zhuang Yiting? Zi Yuan nodded slowly and said, you guessed right. Last time when we were eating in the mall, Su Chan and the others went to buy clothes. I didn't want to go with them, but Ruan Hongling told me that she had seen second Shibwa Yan Fang nearby. I was shocked and followed her. Later, I found that Shibwa Yan Fang's yang spirit was extremely strong. Her yang spirit had been out of her body for such a long time. If she hadn't found her physical body, it would have been impossible for it to be so strong. Moreover, she knew our actions like the back of her hand, so it was very likely that she had been lurking around us. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he said, moreover, she had possessed Mo Ashi before, so you suspect that she is in Fox Zen school? Zi Yuan said, yes. So I immediately rushed to the locker room to see who was with everyone and who was alone. Second Shibwa's yang spirit had just been possessed, so she couldn't skillfully go out of her body while her physical body was unhindered. She must have hidden alone in a place where no one could see her. So at that time, everyone was outside, and only Chao Yi and Zhuang Yiting were in the locker room. At that time, I suspected them. Hearing this, Li Yundong frowned and said hatefully, this Yan Fang is really determined to destroy our Fox Zen school. It's not enough to kill Mo Ashi. She even possessed Chao Yi or Zhuang Yiting. How hateful. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, my reason is the same as when you sent Su Chan away. Li Yundong fell silent. He had sent Su Chan away because he was afraid that she would hear these things and reveal her usual words and deeds. He was also afraid that the little girl would not be able to accept such a blow in her heart. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said unwillingly, I can understand that Su Chan can't hide her words, but I can't be so careless, can I? How could you hide such a big thing from me? If Yan Fang had harmed people during this period of time, how would I explain it to others? Zi Yuan sighed. I was sure that Yan Fang wouldn't do anything. She had painstakingly lurked around us. She must have a plan, and it must be a big one. However, this matter is indeed my fault. I will apologize to you first. Li Yundong waved his hand and said, forget it. It's useless to talk about it now. Let me ask you the second question. However, Zi Yuan smiled slightly and asked, you must have a lot of questions. Why don't we ask one each? That would be fairer. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, well, if you have any questions, ask them. Zi Yuan nodded and asked, what are you going to do with the Renyuan Jindan you took back? If I'm not wrong, you should either give it to Su Chan or Zhou Qin, but which one do you want to give it to? This sentence immediately made Li Yundong fall into silence and contemplation. Chapter 382. Go to watch net. Zi Yuan's question rendered Li Yundong speechless for a long time. After a long time, Li Yundong let out a long sigh and asked, why don't you want this Renyuan Jindan? Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, people like us who have cultivated to the Yangshan phase will have no effect on taking elixirs. First, we have to cultivate slowly on our own. Second, unless we take the Dun Jindan, it will be impossible for us to break through the bottleneck in a short time and enter the Jinshan phase. Go to watch net. Therefore, it would be a waste to give this Renyuan Jindan to you or me. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said with a troubled expression, I actually have a preference in my heart, but it's hard to say now. I have to talk to the two of them and ask their opinions before I can make a decision. Seeing that Li Yundong was so embarrassed, Zi Yuan was too embarrassed to make things difficult for him anymore. She said, forget it. You can ask your question again. Li Yundong didn't stand on ceremony with her and immediately asked, do you think Yan Fang was trying to force us to come out? Zi Yuan thought for a moment and said, it's very possible. Li Yundong asked again, do you think she deliberately led us to Mount Gazao tonight? Zi Yuan pondered for a moment and said carefully, it's possible. Li Yundong frowned. He seemed to be talking to himself as he said, if she wants to lead us to Mount Gazao on purpose, why would she do that? Since she wanted to lead us there, why did she force us to show up? What good would it do her to force us to show up? Zi Yuan followed his train of thought and said, have you ever wondered why the dead Main Yang would reappear in front of us? If the Main Yang we saw was real, then who was the dead one? Li Yundong clapped his hands and said in a deep voice, you've asked the key question. I suspect that the dead Main Yang was a substitute or a Liujia Yang spirit talisman. Since the Liujia Yang spirit talisman can transform into a living person, why can't it transform into a corpse that has been sucked dry? A look of admiration appeared on Zi Yuan's face as she praised, you're right. That's very possible. Li Yundong was encouraged. He became spirited and said, moreover, we saw a mysterious person rescue Main Yang and trap us with the immortal tying rope. I've seen this person in the secret chamber of the Fox Zen school. Who do you think he is? Zi Yuan frowned imperceptibly. She hesitated for a moment, then shook her head and said, I can vaguely guess, but I can't say for sure. Li Yundong said, it's hard for you to say. Then write his name on your palm, and then I'll write one too. Let's see if we have the same idea. Zi Yuan nodded and said, all right. After that, she picked up a pen in Li Yundong's room, wrote a word on the palm of her hand, and then handed it to Li Yundong. After Li Yundong finished writing, they stretched out their palms together. Li Yundong took a closer look and saw that the word Lu was written on Zi Yuan's palm, while the word Yi was written on his palm. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Li Yundong closed his palm and said, if this person is the former leader, Lu Yi, then there will be more problems. Zi Yuan rubbed the palm of her other hand gently, and the word in her palm disappeared. Zi Yuan nodded and said, "You're right. Why did Lu Yi pretend to be dead at that time? Why did he pass the Fox Zen school to you? Why was he with Wang Jinyuan of the Gazao sect? Why did his appearance and figure change so much? Why did he set up a false scene of killing Zhang Sunhong and Mei Nyang? Why did he save Mei Nyang? Why did he tie us up with the immortal tying rope?" Faced with so many questions, Li Yundong couldn't help but sigh. He smiled bitterly and said, "I didn't expect that I would cause so much trouble as the leader of the Fox Zen school." Zi Yuan said coldly, "Li Yundong, don't underestimate these things. My second Shibua, Yan Fang, has repeatedly warned me that there will be a great calamity in the cultivation world. Moreover, didn't you suspect that someone has been following us? Moreover, this person also stole the bodies of the 2 golden snakes. Now it seems that it is very likely that Lu Yi stole the bodies of the 2 golden snakes. If I'm not wrong, there must be a great calamity brewing in the cultivation world, and the one who started this calamity was either my second Shibua, Yan Fang, or Lu Yi and Wang Jinyuan." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "You're right. Lu Yi stole the 2 big golden snakes, and it's very likely that he gave them to Wang Jinyuan to refine the Diyuan Jindan. But why does he want to refine the Diyuan Jindan? For his own use? What good will it do him to do so many things?" As Li Yundong spoke, he suddenly felt a strong sense of unhappiness in his heart. He had taken over the Fox Zen school in the face of danger, but in the end, he had found that he had been used by others. This feeling made him very unhappy. Zi Yuan seemed to notice Li Yundong's emotions. She comforted him softly and said, "If you don't want to be used, don't be the leader." Li Yundong let out a long sigh and said, "I didn't become the leader for myself. Although it's indeed very cool to bring such a group of beautiful foxes in and out, if it weren't for Su Chan, I would never have become the leader of the sect. She has lost her master now. If the Fox Zen school also suffers a calamity in my hands, I really don't know how to face her. Moreover, although Lu Yi faked his death in the Fox Zen school, he doesn't necessarily have evil intentions. Moreover, I believe that the other people in the Fox Zen school don't know about Lu Ye's fake death. In fact, most of them are like Su Chan, innocent and pure. If I abandon them, I'm afraid that they will be doomed eternally." Zi Yuan was stunned. She couldn't help but show strong appreciation and admiration in her eyes. She said, "Yes, this is a good man who is affectionate and righteous. After getting along with them these days, I can feel that the Fox Zen school is very dependent on you. If you abandon them at this time, they will definitely not be able to accept this fact and the consequences." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Yes, I can only hide it from them and protect them secretly, especially Su Chan and Zhou Qin. I owe them the most, so I can't let them get hurt at all." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Then what do you want to do in the future? The cultivators we offended tonight, although they didn't immediately come to fight us, which means that they have accepted the fact that Renyuan Jindan was stolen by us, they will definitely not let it go. In my opinion, if they want to retaliate against us, there are only a few ways." Li Yundong's expression was solemn. "Go ahead, I'm listening." Zi Yuan stretched out a slender finger and said, "First, they come to challenge us and privately arrange a secret place to settle their grievances. This is unlikely, because as long as we are in a place with more mortals in the secular world, the more they can't do anything to us. We can just refuse them." Li Yundong nodded and said, "That's right. What's the second way?" Zi Yuan stretched out a second finger and said, "Second, they can sneak attack you, just like what you encountered before." Li Yundong snorted and said, "Then let them come. As long as they don't attack the other people of the Fox Zen school." Zi Yuan said, "The cultivators we offended tonight are all famous people. Although some of them are shameless and wretched, they won't do such a thing. Otherwise, if word gets out, their reputations will be ruined." Li Yundong was slightly relieved. If that's the case, that's good. What about the third way? Zi Yuan raised a third finger and said, "Third, the Taoist assembly will be held in a while. They will definitely invite us. If we don't participate, all the Taoist sects in the world will come to make trouble for us, because everyone will think that we are weak and easy to bully. Most of the cultivation sects only have a cold relationship of the law of the jungle, and there is no such thing as helping the weak. Beating a drowning dog had always been their way of doing things. But if we participate, they will be able to attack you openly. This is also the dilemma I am most worried about." Li Yundong laughed and clapped his hands. He said, "What's there to worry about? As the saying goes, if you know there is a tiger on the mountain, you will go there. These people are hoping that we won't go, so I will go. Not only will I go, but I will also let these people see that I, Li Yundong, am not easy to bully. Our Fox Zen school is not a soft persimmon that anyone can pinch at will." Zi Yuan nodded slightly and said, "Fourth, and also the last point, if they can't use force, they will definitely use force. They will suppress us in business, run on us, and cut off our source of income." Li Yundong frowned and said in a low voice, "This is what I'm most worried about. The other sects are powerful, and your previous connections have been cut off by the Zhengyi school. In this regard, we are at an absolute disadvantage and are likely to suffer a great loss." Seeing that Li Yundong was worried, Zi Yuan persuaded him softly, "In fact, there's no need to worry. As the saying goes, when soldiers come, we will deal with them. As long as they don't come directly to us, we will have a way to deal with them. Besides, if the worst comes to the worst, we can just close this shop and find other ways to make money. There are many ways to make money in the world, so there's no need to fight with them." After hearing Zi Yuan's words, Li Yundong chuckled and said, "It's not that easy for them to cut off our source of income. The secular world is not like the cultivation world. It is reasonable and has rules. How can they be allowed to act recklessly?" Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, "It's naturally better if you can accept it. I'm just afraid that you will do something wrong on impulse because you can't accept it." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Do I look like such a person?" Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and said, "Aren't you? You were so impulsive that you almost committed suicide in the Gazao sect and even yelled at me. Have you forgotten it so quickly?" Li Yundong raised his head and laughed dryly. "That was an accident, an accident." As he spoke, he looked at Zi Yuan's beautiful face with interest and said with a smile, "Will Fairy Sister also settle accounts after autumn?" Hearing this, Zi Yuan was stunned and rolled her eyes at Li Yundong angrily. "What? Am I not a human? I've never been yelled at like this in my life." Li Yundong quickly smiled apologetically and said, Okay, I was wrong. Fairy Sister, please forgive me this time. Fairy Sister's great kindness, I can't repay it even if I work like an ox or a horse." Zi Yuan snorted. She opened her mouth to ridicule Li Yundong, but suddenly felt that it was a little inappropriate to talk to him like this. It was like two young lovers flirting. Zi Yuan's ears suddenly became a little hot and red. She didn't dare to stay any longer. She walked to the door, turned her head, and said, "I'm going to call Su Chan in. If you have something to say it to her. I'm leaving." Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan's expression was both angry and happy. Her cheeks were even more pink, and there was a rare charm flowing in the corners of her eyes. It was really indescribably moving. His heart skipped a beat, and he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He watched helplessly as Zi Yuan went out the door, but he couldn't say a word. After Zi Yuan went out the door, she saw Su Chan sitting on the sofa in the living room. The little girl lowered her head and swung her legs gently. Her eyes were looking at her shaking toes, as if she was thinking about something. When Su Chan heard the door open, she raised her head and saw Zi Yuan coming out. Her eyes lit up and she went up to her. Sister Ziyuan, Yundong didn't say anything about you, did he? Ziyuan looked at Su Chan's innocent face. For some reason, she suddenly had an inexplicable feeling in her heart. At this time, she didn't want to face this girl. Ziyuan's eyes were a little evasive as she said, "No, well, Li Yundong asked you to go up." As she said this, she hurriedly left Li Yundong's residence, jumped from the balcony back to her residence like a thief, and quickly entered her room. As soon as she closed the door, Ziyuan let out a long sigh of relief. She leaned her back against the door, her chest rising and falling, and her eyes sparkling. There seemed to be a different taste and feeling coming from her soft chest and beating heart. This was a feeling she had never experienced in her life. This feeling was like wild grass in spring, spreading rapidly, making her chest feel numb and soft. Especially when she and Li Yundong had been tied together before, Li Yundong's strong and broad chest had pressed against her soft chest, which had made her feel hot all over and weak all over. Once again, she had been attacked, which had made the usually calm and tranquil fairy's heart feel like it was a tangled mess. The spirit mirror is easy to break, and the immortal sword can't cut the red rope. Master, what is the meaning of your psalm? Ziyuan pressed her hands against her chest and softly murmured this fateful psalm. Her eyes were lost in thought as she stared blankly at the empty room. For a moment, she was a little lost. Chapter 383. Go to watch net. After Ziyuan left Li Yundong's room, Su Chan was keenly aware of Ziyuan's strangeness. She watched Ziyuan leave, then quietly entered Li Yundong's room and carefully closed the door. Go to watch net. Su Chan rushed to Li Yundong like a thief and said, "Master, I'm here." Seeing her like this, Li Yundong immediately laughed and waved to her. "Girl, come to your master's side." Su Chan smiled sweetly and snuggled up to Li Yundong's side. She blinked her eyes and looked at her partner lovingly. The little girl said softly, "Yundong, you didn't quarrel with Sister Ziyuan just now, did you?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Don't be silly. Ziyuan is my teacher and friend. She has done too much for me. I can't even respect her enough. How could I quarrel with her? Even if she is in the wrong, I will let her have her way." Hearing this, Su Chan was relieved and said with a sweet smile, "That's good. Sister Ziyuan's sect was sealed for us. I was so afraid that you would quarrel and make her homeless. I have been driven out before, so I know how it feels to be homeless." Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed in his heart. He gently hugged Su Chan and gently stroked her black hair with his big hand. "You are so kind. You think of others in everything." Su Chan blinked and said, "Because Sister Ziyuan is such a person. She thinks of others in everything, but never herself, so I respect her very much and want to learn from her." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Well, then you should also worship Ziyuan as your master. Linggong's sect will also have one more disciple." Su Chan twisted her body and said coquettishly, "No, I want to worship Shenren Li as my master." As she said this, she grabbed Li Yundong's right hand and pretended to bow down. "Master, disciple Su Chan greets you." Li Yundong burst into laughter and held the little girl in his arms. He said softly, "Girl, let's stop fooling around. I happen to have something to tell you." Su Chan giggled, put her arms around his waist, and buried her face in his chest. She greedily sniffed his strong manly scent and said, "Go ahead, I'm listening." Li Yundong knew that the little girl was born to be playful. Other than practicing kung fu, it was almost impossible for her to stay still for even a minute. Li Yundong smiled and didn't force her. He just held her in his arms and whispered, "Help me think about it. Who should I give this Renuan Jin Dan to?" Upon hearing this, Su Chan immediately froze. Countless images flashed through her mind. Her master snatched the Renyuan Jindan and gave it to her to take away. Then, Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling chased after her. She ran all the way until she met Li Yundong. Then, in order to escape, she threw the Jindan into Li Yundong's mouth, which led to Li Yundong taking the Renyuan Jindan by mistake. She had also made up her mind to squeeze Li Yundong dry, and then slowly got to know him and fall in love with him. These days, little by little, were like a trotting horse lantern in front of Su Chan's eyes. The little girl's mind was like a mirror. She knew that the reason why she and Li Yundong could fall in love with each other in this life was all because of the Renyuan Jindan. She had lost the Renyuan Jindan, but she had gained Li Yundong, a partner who she loved deeply. How could the gains and losses be clearly described in 3 days and 3 nights? Now that the Renyuan Jindan had appeared in front of her again, what should she choose? Su Chan was lost in thought. Li Yundong didn't rush her. He just looked at her lovingly, like a powerful guardian god, silently guarding her, not letting her get hurt at all. Gradually, Su Chan's eyes slowly became clear. She got up from Li Yundong's arms and sat up straight. Her expression was surprisingly serious. She grabbed Li Yundong's hand and said, "Yundong, you've already made up your mind, haven't you?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "I just have a general inclination, but I haven't decided yet. I want to hear your opinion." Su Chan said seriously, "Then I'll tell you what I think." Li Yundong nodded. "Well, I'm listening." Su Chan fixed her eyes on Li Yundong and said word by word, "I want to give this Renyuan Jindan to Sister Zhou Qin." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Why don't you keep it for yourself? Why do you want to give it to her? You know, you should have gotten this Renyuan Jindan. I took your Renyuan Jindan by mistake, and as a result, you couldn't change from a 3-tailed fox spirit to a 6-tailed fox spirit. This should have been yours in the first place. Now it's just returning it to its rightful owner." Su Chan shook her head and grabbed Li Yundong's hand even harder. "No, I don't think so. At that time, I really coveted the Renyuan Jindan, especially before I met you. Every day, I longed to become a great cultivator like the mystical silver fox. But when I met you, I slowly realized that there are things in this world that are more interesting than cultivation. It turns out that there is such a happy and beautiful thing in this world, that there is someone who loves you and loves you." The girl's eyes were a little blurred. She said in a daze, "I think that this must be the blessing that I have cultivated for several lifetimes. That's why I met you. God made me lose the Renyuan Jindan, but he made me get you. It can be seen that God is fair. Only when there is sacrifice can there be gain. But now, if I get the Renyuan Jindan, I'm afraid that I will lose you again." Su Chan threw herself into Li Yundong's arms and murmured, "Sir, you can't leave me. I can't live without you." Li Yundong was moved when he heard Su Chan's words. He suddenly remembered the days when he had been with Su Chan when he was at his lowest. He also remembered the girl's heart-wrenching cry when he and Su Chan had been forced to separate. "Yundong, you must become stronger." Li Yundong's eyes were a little hot and wet. He smiled and patted the girl's back, saying softly, "Don't be silly. I'm very strong now. No one can separate us. You don't have to worry about that." Su Chan shook her head and said, "No, it's not just that. I said that I want to give the Renyuan Jindan to Sister Zhou Qin for other reasons." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Then tell me more." Su Chan said again, "If I take the Renyuan Jindan, it will take me 3 months to digest it. Even with your help, it will still take at least 2 months. Yundong, you sent me away before. Although you didn't say it, I understood what you were thinking. You were just afraid that I would be worried because so many strange things happened tonight. Moreover, we snatched the Renyuan Jindan in front of so many cultivators tonight, so we will definitely make a lot of enemies. Therefore, we should give the Renyuan Jindan to the person who can absorb it the fastest in a short period of time and become the strongest cultivator the fastest. Su Chan said very seriously, I am a fox spirit. My normal cultivation speed is naturally slower than that of pure human beings. Moreover, my aptitude is not as good as Sister Zhou Qin's. She was born to be a Xianing virgin furnace, and now she has your Jindan's qi in her body. Taking the Renyuan Jindan for her can be said to complement each other and get twice the result with half the effort. I believe that with your guidance and the help of the Renyuan Jindan, with Sister Zhou Qin's aptitude, she will definitely be able to reach the Zhuji phase within a month. When the Taoist assembly comes, she will definitely be of great help to you. Li Yundong was very emotional when he heard this. He looked at Su Chan with a complicated look in his eyes and thought to himself, this girl is usually careless, as if she was born to be careless and a little silly, but in fact, she is meticulous and intelligent. She is no less intelligent than anyone else. She can see the current situation more clearly than anyone else, and her heart is like a mirror. Li Yundong said softly, don't you feel sorry for her at all? Aren't you jealous of her at all? However, Su Chan smiled sweetly. She held Li Yundong's arm and said with a smile, she should be jealous of me. Because I have you. As long as you are by my side, I will be satisfied with everything. I have nothing else to ask for. As she said this, the little girl stuck out her tongue and said mischievously to Li Yundong's right hand, Master, it's just hard on you. I'm afraid you'll have to practice the 5 dragons embracing pillar magic kung for a long time. Li Yundong chuckled. He pinched the little girl's nose and said with a straight face to scare her, nonsense, it's obviously you who is practicing the 5 dragons embracing pillar magic kung. Su Chan's cheeks flushed and she giggled. She burrowed her head into Li Yundong's arms and refused to raise her head. You only know how to bully me. You're so annoying. Li Yundong smiled and said, don't worry. Since you are so generous to give the Renyuan Jindan to Zhou Qin, I won't let you suffer a loss. We also heard Wan Zhenyuan say that he was going to refine the Diyuan Jindan. When the Diyuan Jindan is born, we will snatch it from him. At that time, the Diyuan Jindan will be given to you. You can't push it to others. I'm still waiting for you to succeed in your cultivation and fly with you. Do you have the heart to watch him be a widow for the rest of his life? Su Chan giggled. The Diyuan Jindan? It's too difficult to refine. I don't believe he can do it. Li Yundong smiled and didn't comment. After being intimate with the little girl for a while, he said softly to her, since you have made up your mind, I will give the Renyuan Jindan to Zhou Qin. It's not too late for you to regret it now. Su Chan took out the Renyuan Jindan from her arms. In an instant, the room was filled with golden light, which was unusually bright. She handed the Jindan to Li Yundong without hesitation, shook her head hard, and said seriously, no, Sister Zhou Qin has done more for you than I have. This is what she deserves. If I am really destined to take this elixir, there will be more in the future. Li Yundong nodded slowly and said with admiration, I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to get over it, but I didn't expect my girl to be so righteous and open-minded. It's really rare. I'm really lucky. Su Chan giggled and said, then you have to make more delicious food for me to compensate me. Li Yundong laughed. You only know how to eat. Well, you stay in the room. I'll go find Zhou Qin and see if she's asleep. As he said this, Li Yundong held the Renyuan Jindan in his hand and turned to go out. Thank you to the children who voted for me. I have regained the 3rd place. You are so awesome. Tang Tang bowed to express his gratitude. Chapter 384. Go to watch net. Zhou Qin and Su Chan shared a room, and their residence was not very far from Li Yundong's. When Li Yundong came to the door, he gently knocked on it. Watch net. 7 K.O.M. These days, Zhou Qin had been learning some of the most basic cultivation kung fu from Su Chan. She already had some yuanqi in her body, so her foundation was much better than that of ordinary people. Therefore, she had already begun to cultivate qi. Although she hadn't practiced for many days, her 5 senses were much sharper than before. Moreover, her body felt lighter and stronger, and her energy was more abundant. As soon as he knocked on the door, Zhou Qin immediately woke up from her meditation. She asked in a low voice, "Who is it?" Li Yundong said softly, "It's me." Although he didn't say his name, Zhou Qin was very familiar with his voice. She didn't understand why Li Yundong would come to her so late at night and when she was alone in a room. Zhou Qin got up in surprise and suspicion. Her heart was beating wildly as she walked to the door and gently opened it. Sure enough, she saw Li Yundong standing at the door with his hands behind his back, looking at her with a deep gaze. What is he doing here? Zhou Qin panicked and stood at the door in a daze. Li Yundong saw Zhou Qin standing at the door in snow-white pajamas. She was like a water lily, blooming faintly. She was extremely delicate, completely devoid of her usual cold and reserved temperament. Li Yundong smiled and asked, "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Zhou Qin let out a cry, as if she had just woken up from a dream. She blushed and made way for him. Li Yundong entered the room and looked around. He saw 2 fragrant beds on the left and right sides of the 2 girls' boudoirs. A refreshing fragrance wafted into his nostrils. There was a desk in the middle of the bed, on which various Taoist classics were neatly placed. One of them had been opened, and it was full of delicate annotations. Obviously, it was Zhou Qin's notes when she was reading. Li Yundong chuckled. He picked up a book and flipped through it, only to see that it was Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor. However, Zhou Qin had added her own annotations next to Li Yundong's annotations. Li Yundong nodded to himself and said to Zhou Qin, "Not bad, you are very hard-working." Zhou Qin didn't know what he wanted to do in her room in the middle of the night. She was a little uneasy and said in a panic, "Master, it's so late. What's the matter?" Only then did Li Yundong realize that it was indeed inappropriate for him to come to her room alone so late at night. He coughed dryly and said, "I do have something to do. Close the door and I'll talk to you." Zhou Qin's heart pounded violently. A kind of emotion that had been strongly suppressed in her heart suddenly burst out uncontrollably. The usually arrogant and beautiful girl's face was flushed. Her body trembled slightly as she closed the door. Her heart was in turmoil as she said in a trembling voice, "Master, what's the matter?" Seeing Zhou Qin like this, Li Yundong felt a little regretful in his heart. He felt that he shouldn't have come to her at this time. As a result, he had made her think too much. But on second thought, Li Yundong thought that Zhou Qin's deep love for him was really shocking, and he couldn't bear it. Li Yundong sighed to himself. He stretched out the hand holding the Renyuan Jindan, spread his palm, and said to Zhou Qin, "Come on, eat this." Zhou Qin saw a round pill rolling in Li Yundong's palm. The pill was shining with golden light, and the light illuminated the room. Her eyes suddenly widened. Although she was puzzled, she did not hesitate to pick up the Jindan from Li Yundong's palm and swallow it without saying a word. This Renyuan Jindan was about the size of a thumb. When she swallowed it without water, she immediately choked and coughed again and again, and her face turned red. Li Yundong was angry and amused at the same time. He patted her on the back and pointed his finger at the Renning acupoint near her throat, making her throat muscles relax. The Jindan was swallowed by Zhou Qin. Although Zhou Qin had swallowed the Jindan, she still choked with tears in her eyes and kept patting her chest. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you taking medicine or committing suicide? You have to drink water to take the pill. Zhou Qin straightened up and forced a smile at Li Yundong. Her eyes were slightly dim as she said softly, Master, did you come to me so late just to make me eat this? Li Yundong saw that Zhou Qin had no idea what she had eaten. He shook his head and said, You know what I gave you, so why did you swallow it? What if it was poison? Zhou Qin smiled slightly, her smile full of bitterness and sweetness. I will gladly endure the poison you gave me. Li Yundong was silent when he heard this. He sighed softly, pulled out the chair in front of the desk, and sat down. Then he patted her bed and said softly, Zhou Qin, sit down and listen to me. Zhou Qin sat down gently and looked at Li Yundong. She didn't say a word and waited for his words in silence. Li Yundong thought for a moment and began to talk about how he had met Su Chan and how he had taken the Renyuan Jindan by mistake. He talked about how they had snatched the Renyuan Jindan in a scuffle in the Gazao sect tonight. Li Yundong said, It can be said that the reason why I, Li Yundong, have changed from an ordinary person to a cultivator with a little fame now is entirely because I took the Renyuan Jindan you just took. Only then did Zhou Qin realize how precious and magical the thing she had just swallowed was. She subconsciously touched her throat with her hand and said in a tight voice, Why did you give it to me? Why didn't you give it to Su Chan? Isn't it supposed to be hers? Li Yundong said softly, No, Su Chan and I discussed it. We both think that it's best for you to take this Jindan. You have good qualifications and high talent. After taking the Jindan, you can grow faster. And Zhou Qin suddenly said in a hoarse voice, And you feel that you owe me a lot, don't you? Li Yundong was silent. After a while, he slowly nodded and said, Yes, Zhou Qin, I do owe you too much, so this is the only thing I can compensate you with. I also promised you that I would give you a brand new life and a brand new world. This Jindan has brought me a brand new life and a brand new world. Now it's time for you to come to this world. Hearing this, Zhou Qin's eyes suddenly became sore, and more tears welled up in her eyes. She stared at Li Yundong, tears falling down her cheeks. The girl who would rather break than bend choked and sobbed, This is not fair, this is not fair. Why did you decide for me without even asking me? Li Yundong opened his mouth and said in a daze, This is a treasure that no one in the cultivation world doesn't want. You don't want it? Zhou Qin suddenly threw herself into Li Yundong's arms and hugged him tightly. She cried bitterly and said, I'd rather not. I'd rather you owe me for the rest of your life. I don't want you to pay me back. Zhou Qin's crying was like a hand, tearing Li Yundong's heart apart. His body froze and he let Zhou Qin hug him. His hands stopped in midair. He didn't know whether he should push the girl away from him or hold her tightly. After a long time, Zhou Qin's tears had soaked the front of Li Yundong's chest. Her emotions slowly calmed down. Zhou Qin wiped her tears and left Li Yundong's arms. She said in a hoarse voice, Master, I'm sorry. I lost my composure. Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin, who was weeping like a pear blossom, and his heart was heavy. He sighed softly and said, Zhou Qin, you are a good. Before Li Yundong could finish his words, Zhou Qin immediately reached out to cover his mouth. Her tears fell again. Don't say it. Don't give me a good person card. Li Yundong didn't finish his words. When he heard this, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong with tears in her eyes and said, I gave you a good person card before. You don't have to give it back to me again. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, I didn't mean that. Zhou Qin suddenly said in a low voice, Is it because I refused you before, so? Li Yundong quickly shook his head and said, No, absolutely not. Zhou Qin was silent for a long time. She murmured in a low voice, I must have been enemies with you in my previous life, so we will also be enemies in this life. Zhou Qin's voice was extremely soft, like a mosquito. Li Yundong couldn't help but ask, what? Zhou Qin bit her plump and bright red lips hard with her snow-white teeth. Her eyes were full of complicated emotions, which were full of love, resentment, and obsession. She said word by word, sweetheart. Li Yundong looked extremely embarrassed. He looked elsewhere and didn't say anything. Zhou Qin's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong. Gradually, her weak and sad expression disappeared, replaced by strength and stubbornness. She wiped her tears with her palm, found a hairpin beside the bed, and tied her hair up high, revealing her snow-white, swan-like neck. Zhou Qin took a slight breath and said calmly, Master, I know. I will make good use of this Jin Dan. I won't let you down. What should I do next? Seeing that Zhou Qin was no longer forcing him, Li Yundong secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He said, you should meditate first, and then I'll teach you how to use qi. Zhou Qin asked, now? Li Yundong nodded and said, yes, now. The power of the Renyuan Jin Dan dissipates very quickly. Something will happen in a while. Without saying a word, Zhou Qin turned around and quickly cleaned up the bed. Then, she sat cross-legged on it and faced Li Yunyang, preparing to meditate with qi. However, Li Yundong said, no, you should face the wall with your back to me. I'll help you with your qi later. Zhou Qin immediately turned around and turned her back to Li Yundong. Just as she was about to sit down, she suddenly felt a heat in her lower abdomen, as if there was a little mouse scurrying back and forth. Zhou Qin was stunned. She thought that she had been aroused, so she subconsciously didn't dare to say anything. However, it didn't take long for the qi to become stronger and stronger. Gradually, Zhou Qin felt as if she had fallen into a big furnace, and her whole body was boiling hot. At first, Zhou Qin could still grit her teeth and hold on, but after a while, she finally couldn't help but moan in pain. Li Yundong was shocked and quickly felt her pulse with his hand. He immediately found that the qi in her body was running around, just like a wild horse out of control. Li Yundong immediately controlled his Jinqi and injected it into Zhou Qin's body to help her alienate the qi in her body. Li Yundong knew that when he had taken the Renyuan Jin Dan in the past, it was when he was sleeping. At this time, the Jin Dan was invading his body, and he didn't know pain or soreness. At this time, there were no other emotions, so the difficulty of Jin Dan invading his body was easily overcome. But Zhou Qin was different. First, her emotions had fluctuated greatly and she had been shocked. Then, when she was conscious, she experienced the difficulty of Jin Dan invading her body. Moreover, when the qi began to run around, she didn't dare to tell Li Yundong because she was a girl. As a result, the qi in her body was in chaos, and she couldn't bear it anymore. Fortunately, the aura of Li Yundong's Jinqi at this time far exceeded the medicinal power of Jin Dan's qi in Zhou Qin's body, so he was able to control and guide the qi in her body back to their respective meridians, so that it wouldn't run around and avoid the danger of qigong deviation. After Li Yundong controlled the qi in Zhou Qin's body, he secretly cried, "That was close." Li Yundong thought to himself, since ancient times, cultivation must have a good teacher, and the reason why Taoist companions are ranked third is because of this. In this situation just now, if I hadn't been by her side, if my Jinqi cultivation hadn't been stronger than the medicinal power of Renyuan Jin Dan, I'm afraid that Zhou Qin would have become a cripple from now on. I would have harmed her. When Li Yundong thought that Zhou Qin would become a cripple because of Jin Dan invading her body, he couldn't help but feel a little scared and have a lingering fear. Thinking of this, he became more and more serious about protecting Zhou Qin's cultivation. Just like how Su Chan had guarded Li Jiandong back then, Li Jiandong had stayed by Zhou Qin's side for 2 days and 2 nights without taking off his clothes or leaving his body. At this time, there was also a white line of qi rising from the top of Li Yundong's head. However, his line was only as thick as a finger, and it rushed to the ceiling before dispersing in all directions. The white qi above Zhou Qin's head was rising, dispersing in all directions an inch above the top of her head. Zi Yuan knew that Li Yundong was taking advantage of the opportunity of Jindan body cleansing to help Zhou Qin complete the cultivation of the first heaven of shaping the body, the second heaven of meridian cleansing, and the second heaven of meridian cleansing. As long as she passed this stage, Zhou Qin would have completed the primary cultivation of ordinary people and directly entered the intermediate realm of the second heaven. She would then be able to begin visualizing her own god spirit and enter the advanced realm of the second heaven. Zi Yuan's Yin spirit looked at Li Yundong's back for a while. She was about to leave when she suddenly heard Li Yundong say, "Zi Yuan?" When Zi Yuan saw that Li Yundong still had the energy to talk to her while he was concentrating on Zhou Qin's meridian cleansing and expanding her meridians, she couldn't help but admire him in her heart. She replied, "It's me. Su Chan saw that you hadn't come out all night and was afraid that something had happened to you while you were guarding Zhou Qin, so she asked me to take a look." Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "I know. Have you seen the sweat all over Zhou Qin's body?" Zi Yuan nodded. "Yes, it's normal for her to sweat so much when Jindan body cleansing." Li Yundong said, "Yes, Zhou Qin's physique is special. Her kidney fire is strong, and the yin qi in her body is extremely heavy. The yang qi of Jindan is very powerful, and the yin qi of yin and yang qi are attacking her back and forth in her body, causing the qi in her body to surge and her body to sweat a lot. This room is airtight, so the sweat on her body won't dry for a long time. I'm afraid that the moisture will invade her body and cause her a permanent illness, which will cause trouble for her cultivation in the future. Go out and help me find some towels." As a cultivator, Zi Yuan was also an experienced person. She naturally knew how great the impact of moisture on cultivation was. She nodded and answered. Her Yin spirit quickly left the room and returned to her body. As soon as Zi Yuan opened her eyes, she said to Su Chan, "Don't worry, Li Yundong is expanding Zhou Qin's meridian cleansing. I'll go find some towels. You wait here." However, Su Chan stopped her and said, "I'll go." It didn't take long for the little girl to find 3 dry towels. She handed them to Zi Yuan and said softly, "Sister Zi Yuan, you can go." Zi Yuan saw that Su Chan's voice was a little loud, as if she was afraid of disturbing Li Yundong. She couldn't help but smile and say, "Push the door open and go in. It's okay. My Yin spirit was discovered by him when I entered the room, and he even talked to me. Just be gentle and don't disturb Zhou Qin." Su Chan blinked her eyes and hesitated for a while. Then, she boldly pushed the door open and stuck her head out to take a look inside. As soon as she opened the door, she saw a gust of mist rushing out. The figures of Li Yundong and Zhou Qin were looming in the mist. Li Yundong felt that someone was peeping at him at the door, but he didn't have the courage to come in. He immediately knew that this person must be Su Chan. He said in a deep voice, "Chaner? Zi Yuan asked you to bring the towels?" Su Chan saw that Li Yundong didn't even turn his head. He knew what was happening outside the room like the back of his hand. She secretly stuck out her tongue and whispered in admiration, "You're really amazing. You know what's going on without looking or listening." She walked into the room quietly and said softly, "Do you want the towels? Help me wipe the sweat off her body. Be gentle and don't disturb her." Li Yundong stared at the meridians of Zhou Qin's neck, as if he could sense the changes in her body through the beating meridians under her skin. Su Chan stuck out her tongue and said, "How light is light? I can't do it. Do it yourself. Li Yundong shouted in a low voice, didn't you do it for me before? Su Chan said softly, you were a man, and you fell asleep at that time. I didn't care how heavy it was, but now Zhou Qin is just meditating. How can it be the same? Moreover, you have control of her qi, so you know how heavy it is. Naturally, it's best for you to do it. Moreover, she is your disciple, so of course you have to do it yourself. Li Yundong frowned slightly, but he knew that it was not the time to hesitate and be pedantic, so he said decisively, okay, you lift her clothes. Su Chan blinked her eyes and looked at Li Yundong in surprise. But when she saw Li Yundong's serious expression, she immediately knew that she had misunderstood. The little girl stuck out her tongue and secretly blamed herself. Su Chan, how can you not believe me? During cultivation, the teaching of Kung Fu between a master and his disciple is an extremely private and intimate thing. Don't you know that? Su Chan walked over quietly, put the towel in a place where Li Yundong could reach, and then gently helped Zhou Qin lift the clothes on her back. Zhou Qin was wearing pajamas, which were loose, and she wasn't wearing any underwear. As soon as the clothes were lifted, her jade-like back was immediately revealed. Although Su Chan was also a peerless beauty, she saw that Zhou Qin's back was smooth and flawless, like a piece of natural white marble, without a single flaw. The hair on her back was so thin that it was almost impossible to see with the naked eye, and the curve of her back was even more gentle and beautiful. Even Su Chan's heart palpitated and she sighed inwardly. Su Chan was amazed, but Li Yundong seemed to be really facing a stone. He quickly reached out, picked up the towel, and then quickly swept it over Zhou Qin's body. At this time, Li Yundong's whole body and mind were devoted to expanding Zhou Qin's meridians. In his eyes, he could only see the flow of qi inside the human body, but he couldn't see the beauty of the human body. After wiping the sweat off Zhou Qin's back, he threw the towel out the door and said neatly, change. Zi Yuan caught the towel at the door, but she felt that it was heavy and full of sweat. She was shocked and thought to herself, Li Yundong's priorities just now were simply wonderful. Not only did he wipe the sweat off Zhou Qin's back, but he also didn't disturb her. He really has the agility and elegance of a swallow cutting the water. Amazing, really amazing. No wonder he was able to use the Liuhe sword to transmit the heavenly thunder the moment it struck down and accurately hit the fairy-tied rope. Last time, I thought it was a fluke, but now it seems that Li Yundong's control of strength has reached an amazing level. Thinking of this, Zi Yuan couldn't help looking at Li Yundong with respect and admiration. She turned around and wanted to go to the bathroom to wash and change the towel, but she saw that at this time, the other people of the Fox Zen School and Ruan Hongling had all come downstairs. They all looked at her eagerly, as if they wanted to know what had happened upstairs. Zi Yuan whispered to the crowd, Li Yundong is expanding Zhou Qin's meridians. Don't talk loudly, lest you disturb him. Only then did everyone understand. They whispered to each other. Ruan Hongling winked at Zi Yuan and whispered, Sister Zi Yuan, where did you go last night? I went to your room to look for you, but you weren't there. Zi Yuan looked around and saw the 3 Sherbua of the Fox Zen School standing with the little foxes. They all looked up at Li Yundong's room with worried and nervous eyes. She whispered to Ruan Hongling, I'll tell you about it later. It's not convenient now. Ruan Hongling nodded in understanding. She asked again, then I'll go to Li Yundong's room and take a look. I won't say anything. Is that okay? Zi Yuan nodded and whispered, be careful. Li Yundong is fine, but Zhou Qin must not be disturbed. Otherwise, all our efforts will be in vain. Ruan Hongling made a gesture to Zi Yuan to show that she understood. She went upstairs quietly and came to the door to take a look inside. She saw that Su Chan had simply helped Zhou Qin take off her pajamas, while she stood to the side and was responsible for holding the towel for Li Yundong. Li Yundong was still staring at the pulse of Zhou Qin's neck. He took the towel from Su Chan's hand and swept it over Zhou Qin's back. Then, without looking at it, he threw it to the door and said in a low voice, "Change." Ruan Hongling saw a towel flying toward her. She quickly caught it and was angry in her heart. This guy usually doesn't get along with me, but I didn't expect him to order me around like a maid. I'm so angry. But she also knew that this was not the time to lose her temper. She snorted in her heart, turned around, and wanted to go downstairs. Just as Ruan Hongling was about to leave, she suddenly found a faint medicinal fragrance coming from the towel. At this time, Zhou Qin's body suddenly began to bloom with a burst of five-colored brilliance. Ruan Hongling was shocked and blurted out, "Jindan fusing the body? This is Renyuan Jindan?" Her exclamation caused a commotion among the people of the Fox Zen school downstairs. The big and small foxes were all stunned, especially the little foxes, who said one after another, "Renyuan Jindan? Who's taking the Renyuan Jindan up there? Is it the leader? What does Renyuan Jindan look like? Let's go and have a look. I'll make a small advertisement and warmly recommend Meng Po's Red Book, Wrong Love, Evil President. Everyone is welcome to take a look." Chapter 386. Go to Watch Net. Just as the little foxes were about to swarm upstairs, Chao Yi suddenly scolded in a low voice, "Bastard! Do you want sect leader to suffer from qi deviation?" At this time, Zhuang Yiting also stood up and glared at the little foxes. "Don't you know when to make trouble? You really have no sense of propriety." She looked at Chao Yi meaningfully and then at Zhuang Yiting. She nodded slightly to them and then went upstairs. She took the towel from Ruan Hongling's hand and said softly, "Give it to me. You can stay here and keep an eye on her. You don't have to close the door. Anyway, they are all women. I'm not afraid of being exposed. It's better to have some fresh air in the room." Watch Net. 7 KOM. Ruan Hongling glanced at Zhou Qin, her eyes full of strong envy. She said softly, "It's true that different people have different fates. She's really lucky. She has Renyuan Jindan to take and 2 masters to protect her. Humph, I'm not so lucky." Zi Yuan pointed at Ruan Hongling's forehead with her finger, glared at her, and scolded softly, "Don't you have the nerve to say that? You've been fed elixirs and drank medicinal soup since you were young. Do you think you've eaten less of these things? How heartless." Zhou Qin could take the Renyuan Jindan because it was her destiny. As the saying goes, 1's destiny, 2 are luck, 3 are geomancy, 4 are accumulating yin virtue, 5 are reading, 6 are famous, and 8 are worshipping the gods. There were 10 things in life that could change a person the most. The first was fate. Some things are destined by fate, and you can't force it. It's useless even if you envy it so much that you can see through it. You're a cultivator, but you can't even see through this. Ruan Hongling made a face. "You think I don't know? I was just casually talking about it, yet you gave me such a long lecture. Humph, so boring." While the two of them were talking, Li Yundong threw another towel and shouted in a low voice, "Change." Zi Yuan hurriedly threw the dry towel in her hand to Su Chan, then walked to the bathroom to change, and then dried it with her own jinchi. After repeating this dozens of times, the sweat on her body slowly stopped, and the colorful light on her body slowly weakened. At this time, not only did Li Yundong not let out a sigh of relief, but he became even more focused. He whispered in her ear and began to guide her to meditate. She began to look at her own aura and began to visualize the things in the spirit space. 2 days later, Li Yunyang helped Zhou Qin advance by leaps and bounds all the way to the advanced realm of Yin spirit, realization, and great freedom in the third heaven. Only then did Zhou Qin's qi become exhausted and she fell into a deep sleep from meditation. Only then did Li Yundong let out a sigh of relief. At this time, he also felt a wave of fatigue attacking him, and his waist was a little stiff. Li Yundong released the hand that had been pressed against the Baihui acupoint on the top of her head, then covered her with the quilt. He put her down on the bed, tucked her in, and walked out of the room. To his surprise, someone had been waiting at the door of the room for the past 2 days in case he needed any help, but at this time, there was no one at the door. When he walked out of the door and came to the corridor, Li Yundong found that everyone was in the hall, whispering anxiously about something. As soon as Li Yundong came out, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. They all looked up at him. When Zi Yuan, Su Chan, and Ruan Hongling saw Li Yundong, they were immediately overjoyed. Su Chan said in surprise, "Yundong, you're out? Where's Sister Zhou Qin?" Zi Yuan also smiled and said, "Are you done?" Li Yundong nodded to everyone with a smile and walked down the stairs. His voice was full of exhaustion as he said, "I'm done. Zhou Qin has already fallen asleep." "What are you talking about?" At this time, Su Chan's expression immediately turned from joy to worry. She took Li Yundong's hand and said anxiously, "Something happened in the store." Li Yundong was shocked and hurriedly asked, "What happened?" Zi Yuan said softly, "Actually, it's nothing. Don't worry. You've been tired for 2 days. It's not too late to take a rest first." At this time, Su Chan came to her senses and thought, Yundong has been by Zhou Qin's side for 2 days and 2 nights, constantly helping her expand her meridians and guiding her cultivation. Now he's exhausted. Why can't I calm down and make him worry? The little girl also nodded and took Li Yundong's arm. "Yes, Yundong, you'd better take a rest." Li Yundong sighed slightly and said in a low voice, "I'm fine." "What happened?" Seeing that she couldn't dissuade him, Zi Yuan said, "It's just that some of the documents have been blocked by someone. As for the decoration company, all the people under Mr. Han have been poached. Now they can't start the decoration anymore." Li Yundong was stunned. What's going on?" After he finished speaking, everyone in the Fox Zen school was also talking about it. The little foxes all looked worried and looked at Li Yundong eagerly, as if they were hoping that he could come up with a good idea. Seeing that they were worried, Li Yundong winked at Zi Yuan and Su Chan. Then he said to Chao Yi Shibua, "Take the disciples to practice first. I have something to say to Zi Yuan and Su Chan in private." Chao Yi nodded and took the little foxes to Zi Yuan's residence across the street. Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, and Su Chan went to his own room. As soon as he entered, Li Yundong didn't wait for Zi Yuan to close the door and asked, "Our documents have been blocked? What exactly is going on? Is there a need for documents to be verified to open a shop?" Since Zhou Qin had been in charge of this matter before, Li Yundong had given her full authority to handle it without asking any questions. At this time, Zhou Qin was sleeping, so Li Yundong didn't know what the problem was. Zi Yuan explained, "To open a shop, you need a business license." Li Yundong said curiously, "Didn't we get it last time? Didn't old lady Su ask her son to help us with it?" Zi Yuan sighed and said, "Li Yundong, it's not that simple. Last time, old lady Su mainly helped us solve the problem of the storefront and rent, but it's not that simple to get a business license. To get a business license, you first need a storefront, then you need all kinds of documents, as well as the lease contract from the Housing Administration Bureau." At this time, Su Chan also interrupted and said, "Last time, Sister Zhou Qin went to get the lease contract from the Housing Administration Bureau, right?" Zi Yuan nodded and said, yes, in short, we need the original and copy of the business license, the code certificate, the land tax certificate, the national tax certificate, the account opening permit. Li Yundong felt a headache coming on. Wait, how can there be so many things? I thought Zhou Qin had settled everything last time. Zi Yuan shook her head and sighed helplessly. Don't you know where you are? This is China. Don't you know that these officials are waiting for these things to torture you? I haven't finished yet. We need a health permit from the health bureau to open a tea house. And the most important thing, which is also the biggest problem they've been choking us with, is, we need to have a bank account. This bank account contains our registered capital. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, it's crazy. It's so troublesome to open a shop. Just listening to it gives me a headache. How much does the registered capital cost? Zi Yuan said, at least 1 million. Li Yundong took a breath of cold air. 1 million? F***ck, where can I get 1 million at this time? Zi Yuan said helplessly, in fact, this is not a rigid rule. The standard for the fluctuation of registered capital is very high, but now someone wants to mess with us, so the Industry and Commerce Bureau set the standard very high. Li Yundong said angrily, who stabbed us in the back? It can't be Director Wang, can it? Zi Yuan shook her head and said, I don't think so. I called him before and asked him what was going on. He said that someone above wanted to mess with us, and he couldn't do anything about it. Li Yundong asked, did he say who wanted to mess with us? Zi Yuan said, he didn't dare to say, but I can probably guess. Li Yundong quickly asked, who is it? Zi Yuan sighed and said, Li Yundong, think about it. You have offended so many sects before, and these sects are more or less powerful. Moreover, now that the country has relaxed the management of the cultivation world has begun to spread and expand into the business and political circles again. Officials and businessmen can collude together, so why can't officials and cultivators collude together? You have to know what officials are most afraid of. They are most afraid of death and old age. And what are cultivators best at? It's good for health and prolonging one's life. Li Yundong suddenly understood and said, I see. No wonder Taoist Li Yi made such a big noise a while ago. Qigong masters, national treasures, and famous doctors were all favored by countless rich businessmen and high officials. It turns out that this is the reason. Zi Yuan said, you have offended so many sects before. Although they don't dare to make trouble for you openly, if you want to open a shop in the secular world, they will have countless ways to deal with you. For example, one of them is to block your neck during the approval of the certificate. Li Yundong snorted coldly and said, what about the decoration company? Is this also the doing of these guys? Zi Yuan said, I don't know about that. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, I'll go to the shop now and see what's going on. Zi Yuan said, okay, I'll go with you. Su Chan also smiled crisply and said, I'll go too. Li Yundong saw the playful smile on the little girl's face and felt relieved, as if what he had heard before was just a trivial matter. Li Yundong pinched the tip of the little girl's nose with a smile and said, how can you still laugh? Aren't you worried? The little girl held Li Yundong's arm and said coquettishly, what's there to worry about? Last night on Mount Gazao, you made it through such a dangerous situation. My Yundong will definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing and turn the situation around. Li Yundong laughed and said, you're right. There will be a way out when we get to the mountain. There's nothing to worry about. The group of people went out and took a taxi to the pedestrian street. When they arrived at the shop, Li Yundong saw at a glance that the shop, which had already started construction, was in a mess. There were debris everywhere, especially a small part of the wall that had been smashed, revealing a twisted steel bar, which was particularly dazzling. Zi Yuan frowned slightly. She looked around and said, I called Mr. Han before. He said that he wanted to recruit someone else, but it would take a long time. I'm afraid that we won't be able to open this shop for a while. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Are there no other decoration companies? At this time, Zi Yuan said even more helplessly, I have already contacted several decoration companies in Tiannan City, but they are all busy now. Li Yundong was tongue-tied. It can't be such a coincidence, can it? Zi Yuan said, someone must be playing tricks behind the scenes. Otherwise, it can't be such a coincidence. Li Yundong was about to speak when he suddenly heard the door of the shop being pushed open. An arrogant and harsh voice rang out, Hey, little brother, you're here. Ha ha ha, how is the decoration of the shop going? When Li Yundong heard this, he turned around and saw a middle-aged man holding two coquettish women in his arms, looking at him arrogantly. Who else could it be but Zhao Yuzhen? Well, I accidentally found a picture that looked like a character in this book, so I asked Ziny and Coriander to make it the cover. You can guess which character it is. Since Li Yundong had started cultivating, he had experienced many things. He was no longer the young man who would be impulsive and angry when he encountered something. Especially since he had succeeded as the leader of the Fox Zen school, Li Yundong had grown at an astonishing speed. After hearing Zi Yuan's words, he immediately calmed down and said calmly, Oh? Is that so? Then I was wrong about you, Mr. Zhao. However, as a star entrepreneur in Tiannan City, what kind of shop did you open here? Is such a small business worth your time? Seeing that Li Yundong was angry first and then laughing, Mr. Zhao's heart suddenly trembled. It seemed that he didn't believe that this young man, who was young and vigorous in his impression, could swallow the anger in front of him. He snorted in his heart and said to Li Yundong with a fake smile, Not at all. I heard that you want to open a tea shop for fun, so I was also interested in it. I was curious and wanted to open a tea shop to play with you. When Li Yundong heard this, he smiled sarcastically and said, Oh? Mr. Zhao, you also want to open a tea shop? Not everyone can open a tea shop. Mr. Zhao, do you know anything about tea? Don't mess it up. Zhao Yuzhen smiled proudly and said, Can't I open a tea shop if I don't know anything about tea? If I don't know, I can ask those who do. Anyway, I have too much money to spend. If I mess it up, I can just close down and open another shop. This bit of money, to your big brother, TSK, it's just a drop in the bucket, not worth mentioning. But you have to be careful, little brother. If your shop is ruined, it won't be easy to clean up. Li Yundong sneered and said, Mr. Zhao, you know me very well. It seems that I'm destined to fight with you. Zhao Yuzhen hugged the women around him and said with an arrogant smile, Little brother, you've gone too far. I was just playing. I didn't mean to challenge you to a duel. However, as the saying goes, there are no fathers and sons in the casino, and there are no brothers in the business world. I call you brother now, but when the shop opens, I won't show any mercy. However, I am a generous person. If one day you are desperate and have no food to eat, you can come to me. I, Zhao Yuzhen, will definitely give you a bowl of rice to eat. When Li Yundong heard this, he raised his head and laughed. His laughter was loud and sonorous, revealing a sense of pride and anger. It was like a tiger roaring in the mountains or a lion roaring in the wilderness. Li Yundong's Zhenqi was strong, and the door of the shop was closed, forming a closed space. Li Yundong's laughter immediately echoed in the shop, causing Zhao Yogan's eardrums to hurt and his brain to buzz. The two prostitutes who had come with him also covered their ears in pain. Su Chan and Zi Yuan were cultivators. They acted as if nothing had happened to Li Yundong's laughter and looked at Zhao Yuzhen and the others with sarcasm. A sharp-faced woman beside Zhao Yuzhen couldn't stand it anymore and shouted, "Stop laughing. My eardrums are going to burst." But as soon as her voice came out of her throat, it was immediately drowned out by Li Yundong's voice, as if a small boat was quickly drowned by stormy waves. After enduring for a while, President Zhao finally couldn't stand it anymore. He covered his ears with both hands, his face full of pain, and his body was on the verge of collapse. At this time, the door of the shop was suddenly opened, and 4 or 5 people in police uniforms rushed in and shouted, "What happened?" As the door was pulled open, Li Yundong immediately stopped laughing and looked at the policeman who had come in coldly. One of the leading policemen said to Zhao Yuzhen with a flattering smile, "President Zhao, what's wrong with you? Did these fellows offend you in any way? Do you want me to arrest them for you?" Li Yundong sneered in his heart. He glanced at Zi Yuan and thought to himself, Zi Yuan is right. Zhao Yuzhen really has a trap waiting for me to jump into. At this time, Su Chan said loudly, "Hey, you people are unreasonable. Can't you see that my Yundong is so far away from your President Zhao? Don't make irresponsible remarks and confuse black and white." The leading policeman turned his head and was about to scold her with a sneer, but he saw Su Chan at a glance. His eyes suddenly bulged, and he almost drooled. He looked so stupid that he couldn't say a word. Zhao Yuzhen saw that the policemen were so shocked that they couldn't speak after seeing Su Chan and Zi Yuan. He snorted coldly in his heart and gritted his teeth. "I'm fine. You guys go out first." Only then did the policemen wake up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They obediently went out of the door and looked back 3 times. After they went out, they refused to leave and stared at Su Chan through the transparent glass window of the shop. Zhao Yuzhen glanced at Li Yundong with malicious eyes and said, "Little brother, I hope you can laugh like this in the future." After that, he pulled the 2 beautiful women beside him who had not yet recovered and was about to go out. Seeing that he was about to leave, Li Yundong snorted and said coldly, "President Zhao, don't be in such a hurry to leave. I still have something to say." Zhao Yuzhen turned around and said coldly, "What is it?" Li Yundong snorted coldly and said, "President Zhao, since you are broad-minded, I naturally can't be narrow-minded. If one day you have nowhere to go, you can come to my shop and be a customer. Although I don't think I'm Lord Mengchang, I'm not Fan Zhu, who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. I still have the ability to support a few thieves." Zhao Yuzhen's face suddenly turned red. He snorted and said, "Young man, don't be so arrogant. Be careful, or I'll make your shop close down in less than 3 months." Li Yundong was furious, but there was always a faint sneer on his face. He said, "If you're old, you should take care of yourself. Don't come out to show off. I promise you that within 3 months, I will uproot you. I'll make you worse than a stray dog on the side of the road. Well, you have guts." Zhao Yuzhen suddenly became furious. He gritted his teeth and stamped his feet. Ignoring the 2 women beside him, he turned around and rushed out of the shop. The 2 beautiful women, who were dressed very well, suddenly looked at each other awkwardly and then secretly glanced at Li Yundong. They had seen that Li Yundong had been provoked and humiliated by Zhao Yuzhen again and again. Although he had been angry, he had been able to control his emotions. Not only had he been able to control himself, but his tongue had also been like a knife. In turn, he had humiliated and satirized Zhao Yuzhen and made him lose his composure. Not to mention anything else, just his ability to control himself and his bearing were far better than all the peers they had ever seen. He was even calmer than some successful people who looked glamorous on the surface. In particular, Li Yundong stood where he was. He was dignified without being angry, revealing an imposing manner that was difficult for others to match. Su Chan and Zi Yuan stood on either side of him, like stars surrounding the moon. For a moment, the two women, who were used to the world, did not dare to retreat. They stood there at a loss, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. Li Yundong saw that the two of them were embarrassed. Although he despised their degenerate behavior, he also sympathized with their current situation, so he shouted, "What are you still doing standing here? Do you want me to treat you to dinner?" Only then did the two women escape from the shop as if they had been granted amnesty. After they got out of the shop, they looked around, but Zhao Yuzhen was nowhere to be seen. The pointy-faced woman immediately cursed, "Is this B**** still a man? He's really a B****. How could he leave us two weak women there? F***ck, Zhao, you son of a B***tch. You have no anus when you give birth. God will punish you sooner or later." The round-faced woman's character was more gentle. She persuaded helplessly, "Forget it. It's not the first time you know his character and temper. Aren't we just trying to make money?" The pointy-faced woman spat fiercely on the ground and said, "What the hell? You don't have the ability, so you take it out on us." The round-faced woman sighed and slowly walked along the pedestrian street with the pointy-faced woman in her arms. As she walked, she said faintly, "Who asked us to be prostitutes? Who would be serious about a prostitute? Alas, in fact, the road is also chosen by oneself. When I was in college, my boyfriend was very good to me, but he was too poor. At that time, I thought he didn't have the ability to support me, so I kicked him out. As a result, I walked on this road myself. In the past, I used to think that relying on a tycoon was very impressive and gave me face. Now it seems that those tycoons don't even see us as humans. They just treat us as playthings. Just like today, they throw us away and abandon us as they please." The pointy-faced woman's beautiful eyes flashed with resentment and hatred. She gritted her teeth and said, "Humph, don't let this Zhao fall into my hands one day, otherwise." Seeing the fierce light in her eyes, the round-faced woman was shocked and quickly persuaded, "Don't be silly. Why should we, weak women, fight with him? Why don't you just let him fight with that boy surnamed Li? I think this handsome guy surnamed Li is definitely not an ordinary person. Mr. Zhao may not be able to defeat him." The pointy-faced woman sneered and said, "Nonsense. That guy surnamed Zhao only knows how to bully the weak and fear the strong. He can't even compare to a hair of this handsome guy. Humph, if this handsome guy wants me, I'll immediately take my dowry and go to him." The round-faced woman sneered and said, "Don't joke around. Don't you see that the two best girls around him are still virgins? He doesn't even want to eat these two, so why would he want leftovers like us?" The pointy-faced woman was furious at first. She glared fiercely at her companion beside her, but she soon softened like a deflated balloon. She sighed faintly and said, "Sigh, if I could spend a night with this handsome guy, I'd be willing to shorten my life by 10 years. As soon as she finished speaking, Zhao Yuzhen suddenly appeared beside her like a ghost and said coldly, "What did you just say?" Although the pointy-faced woman and the round-faced woman were cursing Zhao Yuzhen in private and gnashing their teeth with hatred, they had been by Zhao Yogan's side for a long time. When they suddenly saw Zhao Yuzhen, they were so scared that they couldn't speak. Seeing that Zhao Yogan's eyes were full of malice and resentment, the pointy-faced woman subconsciously covered her face with her hand and shouted, "Don't hit my face, don't hit my face." Zhao Yuzhen knocked her to the ground with a punch and roared, "Bitch, isn't your face the only valuable thing? If I don't hit your face, where should I hit? F***ck, let go of your hand. I'll beat you to death. If you disfigure me, I'll pay you back." The pointy-faced woman curled up into a ball and covered her face with her hands, ignoring Zhao Yogan's punches and kicks. The round-faced woman cried and begged, "Mr. Zhao, please stop. You're going to kill me. Some passers-by couldn't stand it anymore and scolded, "Hey, how can you hit a woman?" Zhao Yuzhen suddenly turned his head, and his eyes were bloodshot. He roared, "I don't need you to care if I hit my own woman." The onlookers saw that he was arrogant and his expression was terrible. For a moment, no one dared to dissuade him. Seeing that she couldn't dissuade him, the round-faced woman suddenly threw herself on the pointy-faced woman and cried, "Mr. Zhao, if you want to hit someone, hit me. Don't hit her anymore. If you hit her again, she will really die." Zhao Yuzhen was so angry that he kicked the round-faced woman in the face, making her face bleed. He said angrily, "You two shameless bitches, get out of here. I don't want to see you again." After that, he snorted angrily and left. After a long time, the two women, who had collapsed on the cold ground, slowly got up and supported each other. Under the pointing of the crowd, they limped away, leaving only a pool of blood and cold eyes. Today, I'll go back to Shenzhen and update in advance. Chapter 388. Go to watch net. After Zhao Yuzhen and the others left, Su Chan spat at Zhao Yogan's figure with a look of disgust. "What a nasty fly," she said. Zi Yuan sighed slightly at Li Yundong and said, "In fact, this kind of person can be ignored. There's no need to quarrel with him. Go to watch net." 7 K.O.M. Li Yundong snorted coldly. "Who's quarreling with him? This guy clearly wants to crush my shop. If he doesn't give me a way out, why should I be polite to him? I let him go last time, but I didn't expect this guy to be so reckless and dare to provoke me again. If I can take this lying down, won't anyone be able to bully me? If cultivators live like turtles, what kind of cultivators are they?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "I've never seen a cultivator like you in the entire cultivation world. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. As the saying goes, if it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Since President Zhao wants to make life difficult for us, let him come." Li Yundong laughed and said, "That's right." Zi Yuan shook her head and said with a smile, "You should solve the decoration problem of our shop first." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Without Butcher Zhang, do I have to eat pig with hair? Are you kidding me? I have a way. Don't worry." Su Chan's eyes widened and she asked curiously, "Yundong, what way do you have?" Li Yundong's face was mysterious. The secret of heaven can't be revealed. He waved his hand and said loudly, "Let's go home. I'm going to hold a temporary meeting." After that, Li Yundong turned around and left the shop. Zi Yuan and Su Chan looked at each other, shook their heads at the same time, and chased after him. After returning home, Li Yundong saw Ruan Hongling at a glance and immediately asked with concern, "How is Zhou Qin?" Ruan Hongling curled her lips and said, "Renyuan Jindan is attacking the meridians, and there are two masters carefully serving her. What else can she do?" Seeing Ruan Hongling's jealousy, Li Yundong laughed and said, "Come on, don't be jealous. I won't forget you if there are benefits in the future." Ruan Hongling jumped up like a rabbit whose tail had been stepped on. "Who's jealous? As a direct disciple of the Linggong sect, I have taken countless elixirs since I was a child. Why should I be jealous of a rookie who hasn't even started cultivating?" Li Yundong deliberately sighed and said, "Alas, you've eaten countless elixirs and miraculous medicines since you were a child, but your cultivation level is only at this level?" Ruan Hongling was instantly furious. She jumped 30 feet high, put her hands on her hips, and said angrily, "Li Yundong, what did you say? If you don't explain yourself clearly today, I won't let you off. What do you mean by this little bit of cultivation? Do you think everyone is as perverted as you?" Seeing that Ruan Hongling was angry, Li Yundong smiled and said, "I was just joking with you. Don't take it so seriously. Zi Yuan also advised, Hongling, can't you just tell us how Zhou Qin is? Ruan Hongling glared at him. She's not dead. Are you satisfied? Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, what a strong smell of gunpowder. Su Chan rolled her eyes and tried to smooth things over. She volunteered and said, I'll go and have a look. After that, she jumped upstairs lightly, stretched her head out, and opened the door to take a look inside. Then, she made a gesture to Li Yundong and said softly, she's sleeping soundly. Li Yundong nodded and lowered his voice. He said, well, call the others. Let's go to Zi Yuan's place for a meeting. I have something to say. Su Chan nodded and called the others out one by one in the room. Ruan Hongling rolled her eyes and said angrily, meeting? Do you think you're the president of the student union? Li Yundong was not angry. He said with a smile, you don't have to come. Ruan Hongling said with an exaggerated expression, that's great. Thank God. Li Yundong added unhurriedly. In that case, I will assign you any tasks and work. I will take your absence as your acceptance of my arrangements. Ruan Hongling said angrily, what tasks and work? Do you think you're an unscrupulous boss who can squeeze the remaining labor value of his employees at will? Li Yundong laughed and said with a fake smile, you did a good job in politics. I'm going over. Don't come to the meeting later. As he said this, he walked to the residence opposite Zi Yuan's. Because Li Yundong and Zi Yuan had exchanged a key when they had first moved in, Li Yundong took out the key and pushed the door open. Ruan Hongling looked at Li Yundong's back and stomped her feet in anger. She took Zi Yuan's hand and said angrily, Sister Zi Yuan, look, look. This guy is bullying me again. Why don't you help me? Zi Yuan rubbed her temples with a headache. Can't you guys stop arguing? Ruan Hongling said angrily, it's not that I want to quarrel. It's him who wants to make things difficult for me. Zi Yuan said helplessly, why didn't you answer him honestly from the beginning? Why did you have to beat around the bush? Ruan Hongling snorted. I don't want to talk nicely when I see him. Zi Yuan sighed and shook her head. Then there's nothing I can do. Ruan Hongling saw the little foxes of the Fox Zen school come out of their rooms curiously and excitedly. One by one, they ran to the living room of Zi Yuan's residence. She rolled her eyes and pulled Zi Yuan aside, whispering, Sister Zi Yuan, why don't you not go to that damn meeting? Zi Yuan looked at Ruan Hongling as if she was looking at an ignorant 3-year-old child. She didn't say a word. Ruan Hongling was a little scared by Zi Yuan's gaze. She stamped her feet and said, well, tell me which side you're on. Are you on the side of your shimmy, who has been with you since you were a child, or are you on the side of this bastard? Zi Yuan was still silent. Her eyes became more and more sympathetic, as if she was looking at an ignorant 2-year-old child. Ruan Hongling couldn't help but say frantically, I know, you've always been on this guy's side. You've been doing this ever since you heard that he is the successor of Jin Dan. I'm really the biggest fool in the world. How could I ask you this question? After that, she rushed to the living room of her residence angrily and then sat down on the sofa angrily. At this time, the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were excitedly whispering to each other, trying to guess what Li Yundong was going to say next. But when they suddenly saw Ruan Hongling rush in, they were all shocked and whispered, what's wrong with her? Su Chan also tugged at Li Yundong's sleeve and whispered, Yundong, did you quarrel with her again? Li Yundong said with an aggrieved expression, I didn't. Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, then why is she so angry? Li Yundong winked and said, women have a few days in a month. You know. Su Chan burst into laughter. You're so annoying. She's a cultivator. Female cultivators after the Zhuji phase don't have menstruation. Ruan Hongling saw Li Yundong and Su Chan looking at her, talking and laughing. She immediately stood up, raised her eyebrows, and said loudly, "What are you guys talking about? If you have the guts, say it out loud." Li Yundong smiled and said, "We're talking about the problem of female cultivators not having menstruation after reaching the Zhuji phase." Ruan Hongling finally seized an opportunity and sneered, "Menstruation means that female cultivators have a leaky body. You have to cultivate a leaky body before you can successfully reach the Zhuji phase. If you don't understand this, how do you cultivate?" Li Yundong tried hard to hold back his laughter and said, "Have you succeeded in the Zhuji phase?" Ruan Hongling said angrily, "Nonsense. If I hadn't reached the Zhuji phase, how would I have the spiritual energy?" Li Yundong finally couldn't help laughing. "But I saw that you were angry just now, just like a woman on her period. I thought that you hadn't succeeded in the Zhuji phase, or that you were a special kind of cultivator who still had a period after the Zhuji phase." As soon as he said this, everyone in the Fox Zen school burst out laughing. Ruan Hongling was ashamed and angry at the same time. She shouted, "Li Yundong, if you have the guts, say it again." However, Li Yundong held his stomach and laughed. Ruan Hongling was furious. She saw that Zi Yuan was the last to enter the living room. She immediately pointed at Li Yundong and said loudly, "Sister Zi Yuan, look, your lover only knows how to bully me." In an instant, the laughter in the living room stopped abruptly. Everyone looked at Ruan Hongling in shock, and then followed her finger to look at Zi Yuan. Everyone in the Fox Zen school looked at Zi Yuan strangely. They all thought in their hearts, "I've always wondered why Jinren Zi Yuan of the Linggong sect helped the leader. Now I finally understand. It turns out that Jinren Zi Yuan likes the leader. The leader's charm is too great. Amazing." Zi Yuan hadn't expected Ruan Hongling to blurt out such a sentence. Her face suddenly turned red, and she glared at Ruan Hongling with shame and anger. She shouted, "Have you taken the wrong medicine?" Her sharp gaze immediately made Ruan Hongling's heart tremble. She knew that she had said something wrong, so she immediately lowered her head and sat down. Her lips wriggled, and she muttered silently, "I didn't say anything wrong. You only know how to be mean to me." Li Yundong saw Zi Yuan standing at the entrance of the door. It was rare for her to be at a loss. If there was a crack in the ground, Zi Yuan would immediately crawl into it. He quickly coughed dryly and said loudly, "Everyone, sit down. Today, the first Congress of the Fox Zen School is officially held." Silence, a deathly silence. Li Yundong looked around awkwardly, then glared at Su Chan, who was also staring at him without any reaction. Clap. "Why are you in a daze?" Only then did the little girl wake up as if from a dream. She clapped her hands vigorously, and the little foxes of the Fox Zen School also followed suit and applauded. A burst of sparse applause diluted a lot of the embarrassment. Li Yundong smiled dryly and said to Zi Yuan, who was frozen in place, "Jinren Zi Yuan, would you like to sit next to me?" Zi Yuan finally found a way out. She glared at Li Yundong and shouted, "Who wants to sit with you?" After that, she turned her head and sat down on the sofa with Ruan Hongling. When Ruan Hongling saw Zi Yuan sitting down, she was immediately overjoyed. But when she looked up, she saw Zi Yuan looking at her with a murderous expression. Ruan Hongling shivered all over and lowered her head again, almost burying it in her chest. The little foxes secretly looked at Zi Yuan and whispered to each other. The sound of rustling in the living room was endless. At this time, Li Yundong finally understood what it was like to be a teacher. There were only a dozen people in the living room, and only Su Chan was looking at him eagerly. The three seniors of the Fox Zen School, Chao Yi, Lu Yuehong, and Zhuang Yiting, were still sitting upright. The others were all thinking about what to do. Li Yundong cleared his throat and said seriously, in view of some things that have happened recently, I have decided to hold a meeting. Since this is the first meeting since I took charge of the work of the Fox Zen School, I have decided to be solemn and respectful." As he said this, Li Yundong said to Su Chan, "Chaner, you will be the clerk and be responsible for taking notes of the meeting." Su Chan responded excitedly and ran back to her residence. She took a pen from Li Yundong's room and then ran back. But when she came back, she found that she didn't have any paper with her. She stuck out her tongue and quickly ran back, took a notebook, and then ran back like a gust of wind. Li Yundong watched helplessly as Su Chan ran back and forth twice to settle the matter. He shook his head and said to Chao Yi and the others, "Chao Yi Shirbua, you are responsible for the discipline of the meeting." Chao Yi and the others didn't know what Li Yundong was up to, so they could only nod with a chuckle. The little foxes loved to be lively. Their attention was finally diverted from Zi Yuan by Li Yundong. They were all in high spirits and looked at Li Yundong expectantly, as if he was going to announce some great news in the next second. Seeing that everyone's attention was finally focused on him, Li Yundong didn't beat around the bush. He coughed dryly and said, "A few things happened today. I won't talk about the others that are not important. The most important thing is that our shop can no longer be renovated because the workers of the decoration company have been poached by our enemy." Before Li Yundong could finish his words, the little foxes shouted angrily, "Who? How dare he poach our people? Scold him." "What's the use of scolding him? I think we should scold his whole family. Yes, including his 18 generations of ancestors. Bah, what's the use of scolding people? If you ask me, we should do it for real." "Wow, 4th Shiji, are you going to kill someone? If a cultivator kills someone, they will be punished by heaven. Damn, who wants to kill someone? I'm so beautiful and smart. Why would I do such a terrible thing like killing someone?" "Then, 4th Shiji, what do you want?" "Humph, if you ask me, find this person's birth date and hair, then make a paper man, then a straw man, nail him, and curse him. Yes, yes, yes. Curse him for the rest of his life. You bunch of good-for-nothings, do you dare to do anything to a real person? If you ask me, let's find a dark and windy night, put a sack over his head, and give him a good beating. Beat him until his mother's mother doesn't recognize him." "His mother's mother? Isn't that his grandmother? What if his grandmother has never seen him before?" "Idiot. The first thing I said was a dirty word. Don't you understand? I'm talking about beating him until his grandmother doesn't recognize him." "Oh. 2nd Shiji is really smart. You're really smart." That's not right. This sentence seems to be 2 vulgarities. Look, it's his mother and his grandmother, of course. Just understand what I mean. Why are you so serious?" The meeting had just begun, and Li Yundong had only said one sentence, but the little foxes were already talking excitedly. The meeting had already slipped into an uncontrollable abyss. Li Yundong felt a headache coming on, and his temples began to throb. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly heard the little girl add excitedly, "If you ask me, I'll kick his balls." Damn! Li Yundong immediately went crazy and turned his head to glare at Su Chan. The little foxes also fell silent and looked at Su Chan in surprise. The little girl had been proud and excited at first, but when she saw everyone looking at her strangely, she immediately shrank her head back and said weakly, I was just suggesting." Before she could finish her words, the little foxes suddenly said in unison, "Yes, kick his balls." Li Yundong burst into tears. He thought to himself, what the hell, is it so difficult to have a meeting? Chapter 389. Go to watch net. After the little foxes shouted in unison, Su Chan poked her head out like a sunny day after a storm. She said with a proud and excited face, "Really? Do you also think my idea is good?" The little foxes nodded in unison. "That's a great idea." Su Chan was overjoyed. She turned her head and was about to ask Li Yundong for credit, but when she saw his black face and countless blue veins on his forehead, her heart suddenly skipped a beat and her head drooped little by little. Like a little wife who had done something wrong, she rubbed the corners of her clothes with both hands and said timidly, I was just saying it casually." Li Yundong's face darkened. He pointed at the notebook and paper on the dining table. "Do what you need to do." "Oh." She lowered her head, looking aggrieved and nervous. Her eyes darted around, and from time to time, she peeked at Li Yundong. When she saw Li Yundong looking at her, she quickly withdrew her gaze, like a frightened deer. Watch net. 7 KOM. Seeing Su Chan's expression, Li Yundong was both angry and amused. He said to the little foxes with a straight face, "Did I say everything just now for nothing? Do I, the sect leader, still keep my word?" Although his words were directed at the little foxes, they were actually meant for Chao Yi and the others to hear. Chao Yi quickly stood up to maintain order and said loudly, "All of you, be quiet and listen to leader." After that, she turned to Li Yundong and said with an apologetic smile, "Leader, please continue." Li Yundong saw that the other people had strange expressions on their faces, as if they wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. He was depressed in his heart, but it was not appropriate for him to lose his temper. He could only laugh and continue, "Now, I will temporarily announce the first rule of the meeting in the future. Before speaking, you must raise your hand first. The host of the meeting is not allowed to speak without permission. Otherwise, why would it be so chaotic?" Yuan Hongling snorted and muttered in a low voice, "Dictatorship." Unexpectedly, Li Yundong glared at him. "Even if you want to scold someone, you have to raise your hand for approval first." Yuan Hongling was furious. She raised her hand high and gritted her teeth. Li Yundong acted as if he hadn't seen it. He said slowly, "Now, I'll announce the second rule of the meeting. As the host of the meeting, he has the right to choose to ignore the speaker." Yuan Hongling was so angry that she pointed at Li Yundong with her hands on her hips and said, "You are too overbearing." Li Yundong still said seriously, "Please raise your hand before you speak." Yuan Hongling raised her hand high again. Li Yundong immediately said, "Continue to ignore her." "You." Yuan Hongling was so angry that she almost fainted. The little foxes of the Fox Zen school couldn't help giggling. Chao Yi, Zhuang Yiting, and Lu Yuehong also had strange expressions on their faces. The corners of their mouths twitched, as if they were trying to hold back their laughter. Su Chan, who had been pressing her head down, burst into laughter, but she quickly covered her mouth with her hands and glanced at him timidly. Seeing that he wasn't paying attention to her, she felt relieved and tried to sneak a smile. Yuan Hongling was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She sat down and gritted her teeth as if she couldn't wait to fry Li Yundong and chew him hard. Li Yundong casually picked up a spoon and used it as a gavel. He knocked on the table and attracted everyone's attention again. He said, "Attention, everyone. Now let's get down to business. Someone robbed us of our decoration workers, and now we can't find a decoration master in the entire Tiannan city. What do you think we should do?" Everyone looked at each other and didn't say a word. Seeing that they were all silent, Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, "You were so enthusiastic just now. Why aren't you talking now?" At this time, Chao Yi raised her hand weakly. Li Yundong quickly said, "Chao Yi Shibua, do you have something to say?" Chao Yi said tentatively, "Leader, if we can't find a decoration master, can we not decorate, save a sum of money, and make do with it?" Li Yundong looked like he was about to collapse. He asked, then if the Taoist temple where the Fox Zen school is located is to be changed into a temple, can we let the monks live in it for a while? Chao Yi smiled dryly. I was just saying. Li Yundong shook his head helplessly and said to the others, do you have any other ideas? Everyone in the Fox Zen school was a master who couldn't do anything right. Li Yundong's words were no different from asking for advice from the blind. The foxes, big and small, looked at each other and shook their heads like a rattle drum. In fact, Li Yundong was just putting on a show. He didn't expect the troublemakers of the Fox Zen school to come up with any good ideas. He straightened his face and said, since no one has a good idea, I'll tell you my idea. Ruan Hongling, who had been sulking, couldn't help but snort again. Why didn't you just say your idea earlier? Why are you beating around the bush? Li Yundong glared at her and said, raise your hand. Ruan Hongling raised her hand, and Li Yundong immediately said, ignore it again. This time, Ruan Hongling didn't even have the strength to be angry. She just rolled her eyes. Seeing that the non-violent and uncooperative miss was finally no longer naughty, Li Yundong coughed again and said, my idea is to do it myself and have enough food and clothing. Do it ourselves? Everyone was shocked at the same time. Zi Yuan, who had been struggling with Ruan Hongling's lover, had not been in the mood for a meeting, but at this time, she said with a surprised face, do you mean that we should decorate it ourselves? Ruan Hongling opened her mouth wide and said, I always thought that there was a limit to your arrogance, but I didn't expect you to be so arrogant. You're the one who's going crazy, don't drag us into it. Su Chan also raised her head and said tongue-tied, Yundong, we don't know how to decorate it. The little foxes looked at each other. Do it ourselves? What do you mean? Are we going out to work? What kind of work? Is it fun? It doesn't matter whether it's fun or not. As long as we can go out. It's so boring to stay in the house all day long. At this time, the little foxes reached a consensus. As long as we can go out and play, it doesn't matter what we do. Their eyes lit up and they nodded in unison. Okay, okay. Leader, what are we going to do? Seeing that the room was in chaos again, Li Yundong hurriedly knocked on the glass table with a spoon and shouted, silence. Raise your hands. Remember to raise your hands. Everyone immediately shut up and looked at Li Yundong in unison. Li Yundong said with a serious face, why, is it difficult to decorate? Why do I feel that it's nothing more than carpentry, masonry, and some decoration and design work? The most difficult thing in the world is cultivation. Is decoration more difficult than cultivation? Which one of you is not a cultivator? Which one of you is not confident? Stand up and speak up. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him. No one was willing to stand up and admit it. They all shook their heads. Li Yundong said again, since you also admit this, then it's easy to talk about it. I'll arrange the work later to ensure that everyone can make the best use of their talents. These words made Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and the others curious. Su Chan secretly poked Li Yundong's arm with a pen and whispered, Yundong, give me a good job later. Unexpectedly, Li Yundong glared at her indifferently and said, raise your hands. Su Chan raised her hand with an aggrieved expression. Only then did Li Yundong nod with satisfaction. Go ahead. The little girl said eagerly, can you give me a good job later? Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, okay, I'll arrange it. When the little foxes heard this, they immediately clamored, it's not fair. We also want a good job. Li Yundong shouted, what are you arguing about? I have my own arrangements. Chao Yi and the other two Shirbas also shouted, don't quarrel. Listen to the leader's arrangements. It won't be too late to quarrel if the arrangements are not good. Huh. What are you talking about? Li Yundong looked at Chao Yi and the other two Sherpa speechlessly. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Ruan Hongling raise her hand high with a bitter look on her face. It was as if she would immediately pounce on Li Yundong and perish together with him if he didn't call her. Li Yundong had no choice but to say, "Hongling, what do you want to say? You don't have to swear." Ruan Hongling snorted and said loudly, "Do you think I'm like you? I just want to ask, I'm not a member of the Fox Zen school. Can I not get involved in this matter?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Okay. But if this shop makes money in the future, you won't get a single cent." Ruan Hongling said proudly, "It doesn't matter. Sister Ziyuan has shares and can get a share of the money. I'll ask her for it." After that, she turned her face and said with a complacent smile, "Sister Ziyuan, isn't that right?" Ziyuan looked at Ruan Hongling with a faint smile on her face and didn't say a word. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. Ruan Hongling's hair stood on end, and she looked defeated. She turned to Li Yundong dejectedly and said, "Well, I'll do my work. What do you want me to do?" With a kind face, Li Yundong said earnestly, "That's right. As the saying goes, everyone is born with a talent. Hongling, you are very experienced, clever, and hard-working. I'll just appoint you as the artistic director and CEO of the Desangxian store." Ruan Hongling originally had a deep grudge against Li Yundong, but when she heard Li Yundong's flattery, she was immediately delighted. She deliberately put on airs and said, "Humph, it sounds good. Who doesn't know that these official titles such as manager and president are as worthless as cabbages?" Li Yundong's face darkened. "Do you want to do it or not? If you don't, I'll let someone else do it." Ruan Hongling immediately replied, "Yes." Li Yundong rolled his eyes at her and said to the little foxes, "You are all shop assistants, future store managers, and shareholders." The little foxes were inexperienced in the world, so they didn't know that Li Yundong was just fooling them. When they saw that Li Yundong was serious, they felt that they were also great people. They were all beaming with joy, as if they didn't have a nose or an eye. Li Yundong tried hard to hold back his laughter and said to Chao Yi and the others, "Sherbua, please be the lobby manager." Chao Yi and the others didn't know what the lobby manager's job was, so they had no choice but to agree to it first in confusion. Li Yundong turned to Ziyuan and said, "Ziyuan, you have contributed the most, and you are also a major shareholder. You can be the general manager of the local Desangxian store." Ziyuan smiled. She didn't expose Li Yundong's tricks. She smiled and nodded without saying a word. Su Chan saw that Li Yundong was talking excitedly, but after a long time, he still couldn't talk about her, so she anxiously waved her hand in front of his eyes. Li Yundong only saw a hand waving left and right in front of him. At first, he deliberately pretended not to see it, but he didn't expect that after a while, the little girl would be so anxious that she simply jumped in front of Li Yundong and blocked his view. Li Yundong had no choice but to say, "What's wrong?" Su Chan stamped her feet and said, "You promised me that you would give me a good job." Li Yundong pretended to be suddenly enlightened, patted his forehead, and said, "Oh, look at me, I almost forgot." Su Chan giggled and said, "It's okay, it's okay. Tell me, what kind of official should I be?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "Alas, at such a young age, all of you are so addicted to being an official." "Ah." Su Chan said coquettishly, "Tell me, tell me." Li Yundong had no choice but to say, "Then I'll appoint you as the chief commander of the renovation this time." Su Chan was overjoyed at first, and her eyebrows were almost flying. But soon she thought about it and said, "That's not right. What do you mean by the chief commander of the renovation this time? What about in the future? No, I want to be like them, a permanent official in the local Desangxian store." Li Yundong pinched the little girl's nose and said with a smile, "You fool, didn't I tell you before? If I am the boss, you will be the boss's wife. Isn't the position of the boss of Desanxian not enough for you to show off?" Su Chan was so happy that she didn't care that there were others around. She put her arms around Li Yundong's neck and kissed him hard. Ruan Hongling stole a glance at Zi Yuan. She didn't know whether it was intentional or not, but Zi Yuan avoided her gaze. Ruan Hongling thought to herself, "This Li Yundong is so heartless. If it weren't for my sister Zi Yuan, he wouldn't have been able to run this shop. How could he say such things in front of so many people? It's too much." Ruan Hongling couldn't help but say sarcastically, "Chief Commander? Boss's wife? What kind of position is that?" Su Chan could hear the hidden meaning in Ruan Hongling's words, but she thought that Ruan Hongling was jealous that her position was higher than hers, so she proudly showed off, "Anyway, I'm a higher official than you." Ruan Hongling snorted and said, "What does it matter? Can you say it out loud?" When Su Chan heard this, she was dumbfounded. How could she know this? The little girl quickly pulled Li Yundong's sleeve and said eagerly, "Yundong, what do I care?" Li Yundong tried hard to hold back his laughter and said, "Don't you know? The chief commander doesn't do anything. It's the same position with or without him." The little girl stared at him blankly and said, "What about the boss's wife? What does it matter?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "Just count the money. How much money you make in the future, just count it." When Su Chan heard this, she became happy again. "Then, how much can I get?" Li Yundong said seriously, "You can't get a penny." At this time, everyone finally couldn't help laughing. Su Chan was so angry that she stamped her feet, and tears welled up in her eyes. She pulled Li Yundong's arm and said angrily, "How can you be like this?" "No, absolutely not." Li Yundong laughed so hard that he squatted on the ground, covering his stomach. Su Chan tried to pull him up for a long time, but she couldn't. Seeing that Ruan Hongling was laughing so exaggeratedly, she said unhappily, "Then what's your position? Do you know what you're in charge of?" Ruan Hongling snorted and was about to show off proudly, but as soon as she opened her mouth, she was a little stunned. She thought to herself, "Art director and CEO? This official title sounds impressive, but what exactly does it do?" Ruan Hongling thought for a while, but she couldn't figure it out, so she braced herself and said, "This is Li Yundong's title. Let him explain." Su Chan immediately turned her head and looked at Li Yundong with tears in her eyes. "Tell me, Yundong, tell me quickly." Li Yundong held back his laughter, stood up, and said, "Art president and CEO?" Ruan Hongling and Su Chan nodded at the same time and said in unison, "Yes, what kind of position is this? What's in charge of?" Li Yundong coughed dryly, adjusted his face, and said seriously, "This is a little difficult to explain. How should I put it?" Ruan Hongling sneered, "You don't even know what the official title is for? You're really something." Li Yundong didn't even look at her and said slowly, "Let me put it this way. I'll tell you the corresponding specific profession, and you'll understand. The meaning of art director and CEO, relatively speaking, is actually carpenters and masons." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone suddenly burst into laughter. This time, it was Su Chan's turn to be proud. The little girl laughed so hard that her waist was like a weak willow in the wind. Ruan Hongling became angry out of shame and shouted, "Li Yundong, I'm not done with you. Yesterday, Shanghai Bridge was a mess, and it was a mess. The plane was at 6:30 p.m., and I didn't board until 11:30 p.m. It was already past 4 o'clock when I arrived home in Shenzhen. I didn't fall asleep until after 5 o'clock. What a tragedy." Chapter 390. Go to watch net. The next morning, Zhao Yuzhen got up early and went to the store he had just bought on the pedestrian street. Watch net. 7 KOM. Although Zhao Yuzhen was narrow-minded and arrogant, he was not a fool. When he first met Li Yundong, he was just a little follower of Chao Kefi, very young and inexperienced. But when he saw him again, the boy's temperament was not the same as before, and there was a large group of beautiful women around him. If a man could attract a rich beauty to favor him, then he might be a pretty boy, but if he could attract a group of beautiful women with different temperaments to surround him and obey his orders, then that was not something a pretty boy could do. Subconsciously, Zhao Yuzhen knew very well that Li Yundong was definitely not an ordinary person, but he didn't want to face it. He was more willing to believe that with his own means and strength, he could easily defeat this guy who he disliked very much. But it was not until what happened before that Zhao Yuzhen suddenly became vigilant. How dare this young man speak so arrogantly? What did he have to rely on? After Zhao Yuzhen went back, he carefully checked Li Yundong's background, but he didn't find anything. He was unwilling to give up, so he carefully checked the women around Li Yundong. This time, he was shocked. He didn't find anything about Su Chan, Zi Yuan, or Wan Hongling, but when he checked Zhou Qin, he was shocked to find that Zhou Qin was the descendant of a high-ranking official. In the land of China, the people did not fight with the officials. In the eyes of the people, Zhao Yuzhen was a great rich businessman, but in the eyes of the officials, he was at best a fart. As for whether it was a loud fart or a smelly fart, it all depended on the attitude of the officials. Fortunately, Zhao Yuzhen soon found that Zhou Qin's father, Zhou Kechang, had stepped down. Now, he was raising flowers and walking dogs at home. It seemed that he had adapted to the life of a second-line worker and had no intention of making a comeback. Only then did Zhao Yuzhen feel relieved. He thought to himself that it was a close call. If Zhou Qin's backer hadn't fallen, he would have immediately gone to ask for forgiveness. But now that Zhou Qin's backer had fallen, it was completely different. As the saying goes, the tea cools when the person is gone. How much power could an official who was removed from office because of corruption still have? However, Zhao Yuzhen had been in the business world for a long time. He knew that the business world was like the officialdom, and the officialdom was like the business world. He did not dare to be careless, for fear that the other party would take drastic measures against him, so he came to the shop in person early in the morning. It was just after 8 o'clock, and there were not many pedestrians on the street. However, Zhao Yuzhen's shop was already busy. A foreman saw Zhao Yuzhen and immediately greeted him with a smile, "Mr. Zhao. Why are you here so early?" Seeing that the shop was in full swing, Zhao Yuzhen nodded, put his hands behind his back, pretended to look around, and then said with a smile, "You're quite early." The foreman said with a face full of smiles, "It's all because President Zhao is paying a lot of money, and the brothers are also working enthusiastically." Zhao Yuzhen patted the foreman on the shoulder with satisfaction and said, "Well, if you do well, I still have money. By the way, if someone wants to poach you, you can tell me. I will give you a raise." The foreman felt a little strange, but he still laughed from the bottom of his heart. He said happily, "President Zhao, you are really a good boss. I have been in this industry for so many years, but I have only seen bosses who think about how to deduct workers' money. I have never seen a boss who thinks about how to pay workers more." Zhao Yuzhen was flattered by the foreman, and he felt comfortable. He also said with a smile, "Don't worry, as long as you do the work well, I won't treat you badly." The foreman nodded and bowed. "Don't worry, President Zhao. We will do our best to do your work well." Zhao Yuzhen was relieved. He took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, squinted at him, and said, "Want one?" The foreman was flattered. He carefully took out a cigarette from the pack and lit it happily. Then he let out a long breath and said, I hate that I didn't meet President Zhao earlier. It's really difficult to meet a good boss like you in this world. Zhao Yuzhen smiled noncommittally. He pointed to Li Jiandong's shop and said, if you were to do the work of the shop opposite, how long would it take for you to finish it? The foreman suddenly looked a little embarrassed. He thought to himself, didn't I work in this shop before? What does President Zhao mean by that? Zhao Yuzhen saw the uncertain expression on the foreman's face. He smiled and said, don't worry, I don't mean anything else. I'm just asking casually. Only then did the foreman feel relieved. He smiled and said, in my opinion, this shop can't be finished in less than a month, and it can't be opened for business in less than 2 months. Zhao Yuzhen asked, it can be decorated in a month? So fast? Then what about my shop? The foreman thought for a moment and said, it will probably take 1.5 months. Zhao Yuzhen suddenly became furious. What? This bastard's shop will only be decorated in a month, but mine will take 1.5 months? Are you kidding me? The foreman was full of grievances. He thought to himself, when I heard you say that a month is fast, I thought you thought the project time was too short and suspected that we were cutting corners. Isn't that what you want? The foreman had no choice but to say, President Zhao, how long do you want to finish it? Zhao Yuzhen said angrily, I have to be faster than them. Do you want me to watch them open before I do? Do you think that a boss like me, who earns hundreds of thousands of yuan a second, has nothing to do and comes here to open a small shop purely out of boredom? I just want to crush the shop opposite. So, you can decorate slower than all the shops in the world, but you have to be faster than them. Only then did the foreman understand. He thought to himself, I was wondering why a big boss like him would come to open a tea shop and poach us with a high salary. It turns out that he has a rival. Hey, I thought he would be a long-term boss, but I didn't expect that he would be so addicted to it. I've suffered a loss this time. The foreman regretted it in his heart, but on second thought, since it's done, why don't I extort money from this guy? In any case, it didn't matter where he was, he could do it anywhere else. The foreman made up his mind and said to Zhao Yuzhen, President Zhao, don't worry. I can finish it in 15 days at the fastest. Worst comes to worst, we can work overtime at night too. But, about the salary, then. Zhao Yuzhen immediately said, don't worry about the money. But you have to ensure the quality of this project. If you dare to fool me, I promise you that you won't get a penny left. The foreman immediately patted his chest and said, President Zhao, don't worry. Only then did Zhao Yuzhen feel relieved. He smoked and looked at the shop in front of him, sneering in his heart. Humph, you're not even fully grown yet, and you want to fight with me? I have hundreds of ways to deal with you in business. While he was feeling proud, the foreman next to him suddenly patted him on the shoulder and said, President Zhao? Zhao Yuzhen was immersed in his sweet dream. He shrank his shoulders impatiently and said, What? The foreman pointed to the left side of Zhao Yuzhen and said with his eyes wide open, Look. Zhao Yuzhen turned his head. It would have been better if he hadn't seen it, but when he saw it, his eyes suddenly popped out, and he was so shocked that he almost fell to the ground. They saw a group of young people walking toward them on the pedestrian street, led by a young man. Although he was wearing ordinary gray casual clothes, he was spirited and had an extraordinary bearing. Behind him were more than 10 beautiful women dressed in different clothes. They all had different appearances, but all of them were stunning beauties, causing the passers-by to stare at them with their mouths agape. This group of people was Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, Wan Hongling, and the fox spirits of the Fox Zen school. The most surprising thing was not their appearance, but the things they were carrying in their hands. Su Chan was carrying a large stack of wrapped snakeskin bags in one hand and a bucket full of pure water in the other. The bucket, which weighed more than 20 kilograms, was carried by Su Chan with one hand as if it were weightless. She was talking and laughing with Li Yundong as she walked. Next to her was Ruan Hongling. She held a bucket of purified water in one hand and carried it on her shoulder. In the other, she carried a huge black plastic bag. With every step she took, there was a clanking sound. It seemed to be the sound of lunch boxes and chopsticks colliding. The proud beauty of the Lingong sect was full of bad luck. She stared at Li Yundong, who was not far from her, and wanted to smash the bucket in her hand at his head. Zi Yuan was also carrying two huge plastic bags in her hands. They were bulging and angular, making it impossible to guess what was inside. Behind them were the little foxes of the Fox Zen School and the 3 Shibua. Each of the little foxes was happily carrying a wooden board that was nearly as high as a person, which even 2 men could not carry. Chao Yi and the others were carrying boxes of tiles that weighed dozens of kilograms. They were all walking as if they were flying, talking and laughing, as if they were about to go on an outing in the wild. Zhao Yuzhen couldn't even close his mouth. The cigarette in his mouth fell on his clothes, burning a big hole in them. The foreman next to him was also dumbfounded. His eyes were blank and he stammered, "My God! What kind of world is this? Am I seeing things? Why are there so many beautiful women doing this kind of rough work?" At this time, Li Yundong and the others had also arrived at the door of the shop. The movement of their group attracted the attention of almost everyone around them. The workers who had been decorating the shop across the street also heard the noise and ran out to see what was going on. When they saw what was going on, they were stunned like everyone else. "I've seen people being treated like animals, but I've never seen so many beautiful women being treated like animals." Zhao Yuzhen felt that his brain had almost stopped working. He knew that he was a person who often destroyed beautiful women, but he had never expected that there would be someone in this world who was even more ruthless than him. The foreman finally recovered. He was stunned and said, What are they going to do?" Zhao Yuzhen also said in a daze, "No, I don't know." The onlookers also whispered to each other, secretly guessing the intentions and purposes of Li Yundong and the others. But before long, they saw the little foxes stack the wooden boards one by one, then open the bag of tiles and put them in the corner one by one. Li Yundong nodded with satisfaction and then said to Zi Yuan, "Zi Yuan, when will the cement and sand be delivered?" Obviously, Zi Yuan was not used to this kind of situation. Her expression was a little strange as she said, "Probably in the afternoon." "Li Yundong, are you sure you want us to do it ourselves?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Of course. Do you have any objections?" Zi Yuan showed a rare expression of a little girl. She curled her lips and rolled her eyes at Li Yundong. "It's too late even if you have any objections now." Li Yundong laughed and said, "It's good that you know. Little foxes. The little foxes love to be lively." When others saw them doing heavy work that even men couldn't do, they thought that Li Yundong was persecuting them. However, they didn't know that the little foxes were all enjoying it. They only felt excited and fun. It was much more fun than cultivating in the mountains or staying at home. When the little foxes heard Li Yundong shout, they immediately answered in a crisp voice, "Yes." Their shouts immediately made the onlookers burst into tears. They cursed in their hearts, "Damn it, how difficult it is to find a beautiful woman these days. It's not easy to find one, but you hold her in the palm of your hand and you're afraid she'll melt. You keep her in your mouth and you're afraid she'll melt. You keep her at home and you're afraid she'll cheat on you. How difficult it is to have a beautiful wife. Damn it, there are so many beautiful women around him. Not only does he not know how to cherish them, but he even orders them around like servants." It was one thing to order them around like servants, but these beautiful women were all grinning from ear to ear, as if they had taken advantage of the heavens. Damn it, how could there be such a thing in the world? Who the hell is this man? You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.